I'm a little rusty on it.
I'll hum it for you.
A stinky person is telling me to hurry up. Jeez, how rude. But so rude, so very, very rude. Sorry, I had to eat dinner really quickly, or I wouldn't have eaten until like 10 o'clock at night. Apologies. Anyway, oh yeah, I forgot my hat. Anyway, how is everyone doing? All right, cool. Everything looks good. Everything looks good. Things are running. Hi there. Let's do the intro. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you might be watching this. My name is Josh, and welcome to my channel. On here, we talk news, politics, and current events, and we just got kind of a little bit of everything today. We got some libs of TikTok stuff. Oh wait, I wanted to add a video to the playlist. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, we got some libs of TikTok stuff I kind of want to watch. Just is this the button I'm looking for? Is this the playlist? Here it is. Okay, cool. Sweet. We got that. Gonna kind of watch a video about the crisis of masculinity, which is a real thing. I know I said that in like kind of a in a joking voice, but no, it's a real thing that we should really be examining. But after that, what do we got? Oh yeah, the Asian dude, what's his name? Charlie Chun. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. I guess he did a follow-up video now. He's put out some other video about being a centrist or finding the middle ground or something. So I'm kind of interested in seeing a follow-up on him. There was a hormone, there was a study conducted on hormone therapy that I want to take a look at. And yeah. And then at the end, we're just going to go over a debate that Vice did over the U.S. education system. So let's just get into it. Before we start, I do want to watch a quick video on, let me make sure this is the right video I'm looking for. Yes, it is. Okay, so this is... All right, so if we want to talk about politics for a minute, and when I say politics, I really mean the actual electoral, the electoral campaign half of politics, the part where you play to voters, the part where you actively attempt to garner someone's support. I want to talk really quickly about the utter lack of presence from the Biden administration, and it seems like Democrats widely in East Palestine for the big train derailment issue. So I want to kind of watch this and just kind of, I haven't watched, I kind of got a vibe check from it when I once before, but I didn't finish it, so I kind of want to just like kind of go through it here. So Joe Biden, to my knowledge, either has not been, or maybe now, finally got around to going to Ohio. Let's see. Yes. So the administration, actually, yeah, there's nothing. So the administration, it looks like, went and knocked on the doors. According to NBC News, the Biden admin knocked on the doors of 530 East Palestine, Ohio residents over the last weekend. Now, not to say that that isn't like good and that they shouldn't have done that. My critique here is going to be, why the fuck are Biden administration officials who are probably, and let's be honest here, these people are not like, these are office guys, or even maybe some people who previously worked in the campaign. But like, these are people. These are not Joe Biden. These are just some nameless nobodies who work in the administration who showed up to knock on the doors and probably offer some words of encouragement, some words of support of the people in East Palestine, and then fucked off. Now, I shouldn't have to tell you how, like, not meeting the moment that is. That's more of what I wanna what's the word? Identify with, or like, talk about here, is the utter lack of motivation, of interest from centrist Democrats in this whole fiasco, in this whole episode. Pete Buttigieg, I have my, the right wing has their critiques mostly framed around him being gay, and that's why he's not capable of doing the job, when unfortunately they missed the very obvious and much more poignant critique of his work, which is that Pete Buttigieg, as a transportation secretary, has been utterly absent from a lot of the country's largest transportation issues since the Biden administration took over. Pete Buttigieg has been nowhere to be found, the same way he's been nowhere to be found in Ohio, the same way he was nowhere to be found during COVID. And, there was talks of like, oh, well, he was on like paternity leave. That's why, which totally fair. But, when you ask me if there's ever a moment to take a break from your paternity leave and you work in the government, like the entire country is kind of hinging on your decision making and whatnot, it's probably expedient to get your ass out of leave and get back to work. And this is a case where Biden should have been in Ohio on like day 2 of this. But now, now we're going to be staring down the legitimate critique that Biden had no interest in going to see these people and no interest in supporting them. So, I'm going to let this play. It's just, at the end of the day, Trump ran his campaign in 2016 under the guise of being a representative for the working class, a representative of economic anxiety, a representative of these exact communities, and the feeling that they have that they've been left behind by not just mainstream politicians, but specifically mainstream Democrat politicians. And the fact that this guy is here and Biden isn't is fucking disgraceful. Let me say that. It is fucking disgraceful that Biden and all the other, centrist Democrats have decided that they are not going to show up. Because at the end of the day, let's be honest here. They're not showing up because they don't give a shit. Because they've given up on these people. From what I understand, I saw, I guess Joy Behar on the View were criticizing, the people who live in this community because they voted for Trump, and she kind of did the, well, you voted for Trump, and then they deregulated the train industry, and then now you get this, you get what you voted for, and she might be right on that. She might be. But to go out there and think that to actively participate in that rhetoric, participate in that in that exercise of spite, it's from a political standpoint. It's the case where it's incredibly damaging to the side that Joy Behar, I'm sure, thinks that she is a representative of. I'm sure she thinks she's a member of. But at the end of the day, but from a interpersonal and from a cultural standpoint, she's just reinforcing the same disinterest that Democrats have with Midwestern rural voters. And, just coming out there and saying it. Yeah, we don't give a shit about you. We don't care. We think you deserve this. Fuck yourself. And it's why at the end of the day, Trump is here and Biden isn't. Yeah. It's just, there's no world where strategically you should be beaten by this buffoon. But they were, because they're losers at the end of the day. But this is also why, this is also why, um, you know, this is why I support Bernie. This is why I am a leftist, not a, centrist or even like, a institutional Democrat. Like, this is why they fail to meet the moment almost every single time. And I'm sick of seeing it, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to hand this country over to people who are just pretending to give a shit. Because that's also the thing. Remember, Trump does not give a fuck about any of this, but Trump wants to win. So he's going to exploit this moment, this pain in these people's lives right now. He's going to exploit that to gain votes and to gain power. But anyway, okay, so PBS, it's just annoying. So, I kind of want to touch on that really quickly, because I noticed that kind of going on last week, but I didn't talk much about the Ohio train incident. But okay, so PBS did a bit of like a, I think it's, what is it, about 12 minutes, just under 12 minutes, kind of like what's the word, diagnosis, it seems like, in terms of the political polarization going on in the country. I want to kind of take a look, because PBS is pretty like normie mainstream, like, pretty normal pretty normie politics, PBS has. So I kind of want to take a look to see like what they're identifying, just because like this is going to be kind of indicative of what regular people, or at least I think it's indicative of the explanation that normal people probably receive when it comes to when we talk about the current moment of political polarization. So let's go take a look.
For the last several weeks, Judy Woodruff has been digging into one of the most pressing issues facing our nation: deep divisions and distrust in some American communities. Tonight, she begins with a look back at our recent history and some of her own, to try to better understand the nature of the divides we face and why this moment feels different. It's part of her new series, America at a Crossroads.
What do we want? Justice!
From fights over our rights
Our rights are not up for debate.
to defining
Oh yeah, let me get out in front of this and just say my piece at the very least. Oh, let me turn this up also. Let me just say, when I hear, so her whole thing is like America at a crossroads, right? What I perceive of that being essentially is we have two poles of this country that are, I think really dividing a lot of Americans. One of them is led by, and quite frankly held back by, the middle, the centrist, the centrist stance of this. But one of them is the progressive push by leftists such as myself, such as, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, other of these folks who are pushing for more leftist, a more egalitarian vision of this country. That is the, in my perception, we have the choice of heading down a more progressive egalitarian route, or stumbling down the path of fascism, which I don't think is, I don't think we're certain. I don't think we're out of the woods on. Jan 6 happened, and it doesn't really seem like our government, specifically, again, the Biden administration, and specifically centrist and corporate-backed Democrats, were very interested in identifying and going after the structures and the systems and the groups that led to the extremism that caused the January 6th riots. It doesn't seem like they were super interested in being involved with understanding that as much of that stuff as they were with convicting the regular people who were victims of misinformation and propaganda, which tells me that they're not interested in or at the very least they don't see the fascist movement in the United States as a movement. They see it as these individual people, these individual members, somebody like Trump, somebody like I don't know if they'd refer to DeSantis. I don't know if they'd refer to DeSantis as a fascist. I certainly would. But they've seen that they see it, I think, as a individual leader problem and not as a ideological route that the Republican Party has taken. But just so we're aware of where I'm thinking on this, and where, if you ask me, that's kind of where we're at.
Who we are, what we believe, and what we teach our children. America is a house divided, and in many ways, it always has been.
Would you agree with Governor Carter, Dr. Krebs, that it's difficult to find qualified women?
I first came to Washington in 1977 to cover President Jimmy Carter, the former governor and peanut farmer I'd followed as a local news reporter in Georgia, where I spent my teenage years.
Judy?
Mr. President, how concerned are you that any...
I stayed here in Washington after
Christ
Carter's
above.
landslide loss to Ronald Reagan in 1980. Through 6 more administrations, trying to better understand how our government works, what motivates our leaders, and how their decisions affect hundreds of millions of Americans across the country.
It's genuinely nuts to me that people who do this work, like this woman, I'm sure, is a phenomenal journalist. I don't know, but you don't go this long interviewing presidents, doing all that stuff without being a good journalist. But the idea that, and I suspect that she has no critique of either capital or any kind of a critique on the systemic corruption our government has been victim to since the 1970s, since the allowance of money into politics, into campaigns. To me, that's, I think that is something that is, quite frankly, patient zero in terms of how we identify what's going on with our government and why it functions, why it is dysfunctional by design and dysfunctional by habit constantly. If you ask me what are all the things that have led to the government being undermining itself actively, losing the trust of the people, and becoming an institution that is so gridlocked and unable to legislate on behalf of the people, regardless of Trump, regardless of Reagan, regardless of Clinton, regardless of Obama, regardless of every one of these administrations, I think you can track a lot of this back to the allowance of money in politics, the legitimizing of money as speech. Just because, after that hearing, you start to see right after, because if I remember correctly, it's 76 when the Supreme Court ruled that, which means 4 years after we got Ronald Reagan, who laid the groundwork for deregulation and for corporate control to take hold. Followed up then by George H.W. Bush, who did much of the same, didn't really do a lot else. H.W. isn't really known for very much. And then we have Clinton comes in right after him, repeals Glass-Steagall, allows banks to begin gambling once again with depositor money, setting the table for the '08 crash, after the banks have decided that they want to make more money, and at the end of the day they've made the correct calculation that the American government, the American taxpayer, is going to front the bill for any of their bad bets while walking away with the profits and subsidizing the losses, and the government will subsidize any of their losses, i.e. being the crumbling of some of those institutions. Leading into, again, we have Bush 2, lying us into war, a continued, the expansion of the, I don't know if you'd call it investigative state, but the, the expansion of the surveillance state. That's the word I'm looking for. The surveillance state, the creation, expansion of the surveillance state over the people of the United States, which we still feel today through the reach of any link you've ever clicked on, any phone you've ever had that has a speaker on it that's been utilized. People make the joke of their personal FBI guy, where you say that you're looking, you're like, oh, I really like that song from this artist, or oh man, I've been meaning to get a chair replacement for the living room dinner table, whatever the fuck. And next thing you know, you open your phone and look at that. You've got 2 ads, one of them being for some artist's new music, and the other one being, oh, look at that, furniture sales. And this, so we talk about ground zero, patient zero, that's where I think you can go back and track a lot of this stuff back to. And I feel like, and to bring it all back, because I know I just went on a really long tangent, but I feel like it's bewildering to me that there are journalists like this woman who do this kind of work every single day, longer than I've probably been alive, and somehow the assertion that this would be the crossroad that we this is the route we took decades ago, is just kind of there but uninteresting. The fact that this isn't an everyday conversation we're having, or an everyday point of tension between journalists and politicians and governmental officials. It's crazy to me. It's crazy to me that this never gets brought up on the journalist side the same way it does. I mean, again, these are also corporate journalists, so I understand that sort of bias, but none of it, we see almost none of it. It's just nuts to me. How you can do this job and just not, and that's never part of your calculus, I feel like. HW was popular for the Gulf War presidency during Berlin Wall. Yeah, thank you, Skeptic Wolf.
What happened today, Jim, was that a feud that has been simmering for weeks between Democrats and a group of conservative Republicans finally reached the boiling point. It all started
over that time. I've watched partisan disagreements grow increasingly hostile.
Always delighted to yield to our distinguished speaker.
You deliberately stood on that well before an emptied house and challenged these people, and you challenged their Americanism. And it's the lowest thing that I've ever seen in my 32 years in Congress.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegally.
And look how fucking young Joe looks.
How stupid are our leaders? How stupid are these politicians?
You're looking for a fair process? You came to the wrong town at the wrong time, my friend.
That means Congress doesn't vote. Well, I'm glad to see you.
To the point that today,
how do you show up to Congress with that fucking jacket, dude? You look like a fucking parody of yourself. Jesus.
There's an unwillingness to work with, or often even talk to, the other side to confront our shared challenges.
The debt debate in Washington heated up again,
almost
with the federal
certainly.
Government set to hit its legal limit on borrowing
almost
in
certainly.
less than a week.
Rising distrust by the public in our big institutions, from the federal government and public health officials to journalists.
We are a nation that no longer has a free and fair press. Fake news is all you get.
We've watched partisan battles that undermine our ability to deal with real problems. Much of the federal government was dark after Congress failed to agree on a stopgap funding bill. Shocking acts of violence directed at our political leaders.
Giffords remains sedated 3 days after being shot in the head at point-blank range.
For at least 5 minutes, gunshots crackled across the Northern Virginia baseball field where Republican members of Congress were practicing.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul, was severely beaten with a hammer this morning, and even...
Notice we're talking about partisanship, and, like, imagine, you know, you can imagine every, like, conservative online who does, like, the, Gabby Giffords, PSYOP, the one on the baseball field, totally legitimate. Oh, the attack on Nancy Pelosi's home, also a complete psyop. Like, how, like, all of these things happen. All of them happen. And, like, only one side is capable of recognizing and accepting that we just don't live in the same reality to a degree, unfortunately.
Even attempts to subvert the machinery of democracy itself.
Chaos erupted at the U.S. Capitol today when pro-Trump demonstrators breached barricades and pushed their way inside.
Our current and former presidents of both parties acknowledge that something has changed over time.
But we didn't have many people playing on...
Jesus, Joe.
On the fears of the American people.
Bro, he can't run. I'm sorry. We can't deal with this again.
Personal, gotten too divisive.
So much of our politics has become a naked appeal to anger, fear, and resentment.
Oh, really? Anger, fear, and resentment. Is that right, George W. Bush, the guy who lied us into an entire war, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths of Iraqi civilians? Is that right? Fucking see, and this is the problem, and this is the fucking problem right here. Here's the problem, because we're going to, and this is again, the reason I wanted to watch this is mainly because this is going to be what normies see. But this is the problem. Look what they're doing. We're drawing an equivalency between Joe Biden saying that politics has become too personal and that people have wrapped up too much of their like personal feelings in the this or that, and the rhetoric has gotten too divisive, and because it's too personal and the rhetoric is divisive, people go more extreme and get more bought into it and become more like radicalized, right? Perfectly reasonable thing to say, which also we can see trends in terms of like left and right radicalism. He is not wrong in that assessment. And then to draw an equivalence, we bring in fucking fucking Iraq war 9/11, like fucking W. Like, holy shit, these things are not equal. The guy who was fucking anointed into the presidency by the Supreme Court, like, these things aren't equal. And this is the problem. I guess this is the problem, because we can't not draw equivalency where there are none. There isn't an equivalency here. This fucking guy has no right to talk to anybody about about any of this shit. Like, fucking Jesus.
That leaves us worried about our nation and our future together.
I've long wanted to better understand what's been happening, the forces driving us apart, and what can be done to overcome them. And that's what this series, America at a Crossroads, will be about. To begin, I want to...
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, Biden was pretty anti-war, like, rather quickly. Let's be clear. Everybody was pro-war back in 2001. The anti-war movement was like ostensibly a like anti-American sentiment back then, especially when we first entered. It wasn't until around 2002 to 2003 when most Americans and a lot of the politicians at the time, especially more on the left, which Biden's not on the left, but my point is, more Democrat politicians started to realize as information got out that there weren't weapons of mass destruction. All of this was just a fucking farce. And once that happened, the support for the war dwindled so fucking fast. Obviously not fast enough, but But yeah, like the initial beginning of the war, there was no political room for anybody to speak out against it. Unfortunately, like obviously there were a few people, but like, all evidence that was given to Americans and everything we were told was that we needed to go into Iraq, this, that, and the other. Everyone was lied into this. But I do know Biden was on the faster end of being anti-war. But yeah. Anyway,
ask the most basic questions: how divided are the American people? And how different are divisions today from what we've seen before?
You're right.
Hello,
I did. Yeah.
Carol, how are you? Good to see you again. How to find out what survey data show, I visited the Pew Research Center, the nonpartisan think tank in downtown Washington that studied public opinion, demographics, and social issues for decades. Carol Doherty and Jocelyn Kiley design and analyze polls that Americans take online each year, revealing how people think and feel about a range of issues and how those feelings change over time.
The country is more divided, certainly along partisan lines than we've seen it. There have been divisions in the past along other lines, but this is a moment where the divisions are deeper than ever, and the intensity of dislike for the other side is probably deeper than ever as well.
I think it's fair to say on virtually every issue domain you can think about, the gap between Republicans and Democrats is bigger than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And so when I say that, I mean on, say, immigration, on abortion, on gun policy, on size of government. There have always been partisan gaps on these issues, but they're all wider than they used to be.
That's true not just of the American public, but of its leaders as well.
If you go back 30 years ago or so, there were a sizable share of Democrats in Congress who were more conservative than the most liberal Republican, and vice versa, a sizable share of Republicans who were more liberal than the most conservative Democrat. That hasn't been the case for nearly 20 years.
It also shows up in presidential approval ratings, which have fallen sharply since the 1950s for both parties.
It used to be that people would reserve their judgment about the new president. There'd be a lot of don't knows if you asked about a new president. And now people go to their partisan corners a lot more quickly in terms of evaluating a new president. So there's not as much of a honeymoon as we used to call it in the old days.
Is that also due to people feeling part of their party and their party is opposed, so therefore they are opposed?
Yeah, they are, exactly. I mean, so for Biden and Trump, it's very, people make their judgments very quickly, again, on the basis of their own partisanship.
And there's another trend that really worries Doherty and Kiley, the degree to which people from one side not only disagree with, but actively dislike those on the other.
It's not new that Republicans have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party and vice versa. But these very unfavorables is what we're focused on here, and these are the sort of intensely negative. And you see that tripling just about between 1994 and 2022 on the Republican side, and a huge spike on the Democratic side as well. And so the shares of people who have this intense dislike for the opposing party has grown so much over the past 20 or 25 years.
We have asked for a while these questions about different traits. And you can see in this graphic that, for instance, 72% of Republicans say that Democrats are more dishonest than other Americans, and 64%.
We're going to go back, but I want to correct the record. All right, cool. Here. Just because I want to correct the record since it seems like I was wrong, which I'm perfectly fine with owning up to. Joe Biden has claimed that despite voting to authorize military force against Iraq in 2002, he opposed the Iraq war from the moment it began. That's not accurate. And Biden now says that he misspoke, naturally. Public position taken in the lead up to the early days of the Iraq war has been litmus test. Sanders proudly boasts about his vote. Yeah. Obviously, Bernie's fucking great. We're running for president. Donald Trump repeated. No. Where's the sentence? There's the paragraph. As chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, when the authorization vote was cast, Biden was at the forefront of the debate about what course to pursue with Iraq. As a result, he was also frequently quoted in the press and spoke numerous times from the Senate floor, providing ample evidence for his position over time. Biden was a consistent critic of the way the Bush admin handled the war, its failure to exhaust diplomatic solutions, its failure to enlist a more robust group of allies for the war effort, and the lack of plan for reconstruction of Iraq. Some of his comments proved to be quite prescient, including his warnings about the likely higher than expected cost and length of the war and complexity of, quote, winning the peace once Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein's regime was toppled. But Biden never outright opposed opposed military action in Iraq in the immediate days after the start of the invasion, as he claimed. And I think down here, if I remember correct, if I can find it super quickly, I don't think he came out with he didn't even start really saying anything negative until like 2003. So yeah. Just want to correct that. I know he's been a little bit more anti-war in terms of like I think specifically, maybe I'm like mixing up Iraq and Afghanistan, because I know he was like really he was a lot more anti-Afghan war towards like, especially after I think the Obama administration, I believe. I'm just wrong about the Iraq war, which yeah, unfortunately a lot of people Biden's hands aren't clean on a lot of stuff, but thank you for correcting me on that.
So much over the past 20 or 25 years.
Let me go back.
One side not only disagree with, but actively dislike those on the other.
It's not new that Republicans have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party and vice versa. But these very unfavorables is what we're focused on here, and these are the sort of intensely negative. And you see that tripling just about between 1994 and 2022 on the Republican side, and a huge spike on the Democratic side as well. And so the shares of people who have this intense dislike for the opposing party has grown so much over the past 20 or 25 years.
So what I'm also concerned about in terms of this video is like the contextualization around that. You can say both parties, both members of each party have become disillusioned by the other's like actions and have like grown more oppositional to the other side. But you like, I feel like a problem I'm going to end up having by the end of this is that it's not contextualizing the actual issues and the actual disagreements that are happening. Moreover, be interested in holding up both parties as equal participants in the polarization, which political polarization is like, not that it's good, but like you need an explanation, I feel like, of that for any kind of real analysis to come out. So, but I'm worried we're not going to get that, or at the very least, people who watch this on TV aren't getting this.
You can see in this graphic that, for instance, 72% of Republicans say that Democrats are more dishonest than other Americans, and 64% of Democrats say the same about Republicans.
Carol, it is striking. I mean, you look at the numbers. Immoral.
I know.
Just in 2016, 35% of Democrats thought Republicans were immoral. Today it's 63, and Republicans, it's gone from 47 to 72.
It is quite striking.
And Jocelyn, from a polling point of view, from a researcher, academic point of view, what's striking about that? I mean, we're talking, I don't know, 20, less than 30 years this has happened.
I think one way to think about this is that people have internalized partisan identity, maybe in a way that we didn't really see, say, 3 decades ago. So it's about issues, it's about emotions, and they kind of feed on each other, meaning as you see the other party further apart on issues, you're less likely to socialize with them. You're less likely to have them in your friend groups. And therefore, maybe you're a little bit more likely to have negative stereotypes about them.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. Who's pushing this? Who's the instigator in all this? Is it Washington pushing the American public, or is it the American public pushing Washington.
Yes. It's both of those things.
Both.
It really is both. And you can think about the role of the media in this too.
Yes.
Over this time period, we started to see more fragmentation of media, so people can tend to be more likely to get their news from places that show them the kind of news that they're interested in. The rise in cable news, the rise in social media, and so I think it would be very difficult to say this is top down or bottom up. It's a mix of both of those.
Keep in mind, she mentions the media. I was kind of curious because I wasn't 100% sure, but Fox News only began in 1996, so we're talking about 26 years. This is about in line with the what's the word, with the time frame that they're looking at. So since, I think it might have started at 94 is when their chart started, but 2 years in, Fox News begins, and however many years later, we're now looking at a highly propagandized viewership on Fox News. So and when we talk about the media, Fox News is going to be, Fox News is the largest network, the most popular network. And is it a shocker that the largest and the most popular one is pushing some of the hardest far right? At the time, and most of the time, Fox News pushes like hard right. And as the advent of things like InfoWars and other online news outlets have kind of cropped up since then, have been pushing farther and farther on the right. Fox News' Overton window has moved. So and same with Republican voters' opinions of Democrats and opinions of people who just don't agree with them politically.
Add to that list a country that is rapidly changing demographically. Extremely high levels of inequality and very low trust in government, regardless of who's in power.
We talk about the ways the two partisan coalitions are growing more demographically distinct. They're also growing more distinct in terms of their issue positions, and then also in terms of how they feel about one another. And each one of those contributes to each other.
Is this pattern just going to continue? Are we just going to see this get more and more intense over time, this partisan antipathy, this partisan hostility, leading to perhaps negative consequences for the country?
And this is what I'll be diving into over the next 2 years, trying to better understand the roots of our disagreements.
Okay. That, I was just kind of curious. I saw that like popped up on my feed, and I was kind of like mildly curious in terms of like what normies are getting. But yeah, I don't, again, my biggest issue is mainly I'm not confident that they're going to be interested in identifying the problem. I think the way they, in a way that isn't drawing equivalencies where there are none. We can say that both parties have been polarized or radicalized or whatever, but we need to look at contextually what are leading to those tensions. We don't root for disagreements, and it's founded by way. Man, didn't let go of power. I think it's a bit reductive, but yeah, I would overall say you're not wrong. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the country was founded for, I'm not going to say for a group of people, but certainly in favor of those with power, those with money, those with influence, who, and it just happened that lined up to be the wealthy landowning whites, and also men, by the way. So, it's always, but, okay. So this is also, this kind of ties into a little bit. So they mention in that video, right? Like, we want to look at like the things why Americans are disagreeing more and more strongly now than before, right? And what could be leading to that. I want to look at, I want to look at an online account of somebody who's kind of at the center of this to a degree, somebody who is emblematic of the divide in the country on like a cultural, from a like cultural standpoint, I should say. To which Shia Raichik, I think, or is it Raya? No, yeah, it's Shia, yeah, whatever. Who gives a fuck? She's a piece of shit. Showed up on Fox and Friends to promote her. To promote her TikTok channel, to promote her, her Twitter, to promote. I guess she wrote a book as well or something. But I want to take a look because, like, if you want to see who these people are or what's leading Americans to be so divided on so many things, then we need to look at somebody who's driving that discourse. So let's go take a look and see what kind of shake she gets on cable media, shall we? Or cable news.
Thank you. Actually, a Maine sixth grader and his dad calling out their school board after the young student found a profane and explicit book in the school library.
The 11-year-old confronting the school board last week.
Liberty Twitcher, I would only caution you to be careful with the, like, drawing the so capitalism is something white people want. I want you to be wary of that statement only because capitalism is a system that is rather ubiquitous across the world, and rather negatively affects white people as much as it affects pretty much all groups, because there are white people who can be poor. White people generally are, on average, less likely to be poor, but be wary of drawing that kind of essentialist line. That's all I'm going to say.
Week saying, quote, when I rented it out to show my dad the book, the librarian asked if I wanted more and if I wanted a graphic novel version.
It's a totally normal thing. You check out a book, the librarian whose job it is to to know the books they have in stock is like, hey, you like this? You're interested in this book? You like this book? Is there something I can, maybe I can recommend you, getting another one that's similar that you might like? Here's another book that in the same vein you might like. This isn't weird, okay?
DAC issue our next guest exposes on her anti-woke social media account, Libs of TikTok. Creator Haya Raichik is here with us this morning. Haya, thank you so much for being here.
It's
First of all,
Haya?
I just want to say
wait, it's
thank you
okay.
for what
I don't
you do
care.
with
I don't
Libs
care
of
if I
TikTok.
mispronounce her name.
It's had a profound impact on exposing the things the left is trying to push on our youngest of kids. This being just the latest example.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. Every single day in America, our children are under attack, specifically in the school system. And that's what I seek to expose every single day.
Yeah, this 11-year-old.
Every single day. Keep in mind, her career. So I think she was doing like real estate shit before she became like pseudo internet famous. But every day she goes onto her account, she goes on her TikTok account, and like people have sent her out of context or like random clips of, queer, non-binary, just basically non-straight people existing, going about whatever version of their lives are. If they're teachers, talking about how much they like their job and how much they love their students, which is a perfectly normal thing that like teachers say. I've heard that from many teachers because they always, they spend untold numbers of hours with their students, so naturally they're going to feel a like kinship with those kids. Like, yeah, like this makes sense. This isn't new. This isn't weird. This is rather normal. You want your teachers to have positive relationships with the kids that they're teaching. Like, that's a pretty obvious thing. Like, you want them to give a shit about your kids' education, for fuck's sake. But yeah, she gets on there and she posts with, again, out of context, and frames these people as sexual predators, as rapists, as groomers, as everything else. And like PBS and like that journalist we saw earlier will say to herself, and will ask like researchers at Pew and be like, what's leading to such division in the country? To which it's rather obvious to a degree. I mean, shit, you have people like this who gain massive followings by targeting regular, like, not, you know, they don't have platforms. None of these people have platforms. They're normal people who live normal lives, work 9-to-5 jobs in schools, but suddenly come under massive scrutiny because they've been targeted for being non-straight, for being non-cis, maybe, in the vicinity of a school. And this woman has decided to turn them into targets, send them harassment, and send them hate. And then they wonder why. It's a wonder why both poles of the political party are beginning to grow more, more. I don't want to say aggressive, but more standoffish with each other. Yeah. It's because these people these teachers, these people are just going about their lives. They're not doing any of this. If Chaya Raichik, Matt Walsh, and all the rest of the people who seem to have a problem so much with gay teachers existing near kids, then they could point me and all the other leftists who speak out against them. They can point us to the statistic where these specific types of teachers commit a disproportionate amount of harm onto children, but they can't do it. They've never been able to demonstrate that. They've never been able to point to any study that shows that. They just go, there's a gay flag, there's a gay in the area. Isn't they're like them being, by the existence of them being gay, is actively harming children. They don't ever explain it. They don't ever have any stats to back that up. They have nothing. They just say it. They target these people. They try to ruin these people's lives. And then when people who are ostensibly, either center or center left grow more and more anxious around the continued exposure they are to these right-wing ghouls, you wonder why the opinions of the liberal side of this have gone up. So, the opinions of liberal or of conservatives by liberals has gone down so much. Obviously, it's a reaction. It's an obvious response to one group targeting the other.
Little boy, he was,
and without that context, you just think, everyone's just.
And he checked out this book,
no, this isn't an everyone issue.
Because it was a picture of two men in bed together on the cover.
Cool.
And he gave it to the librarian, and she was wearing a mask, and he said I could tell she was so excited.
I love how she's wearing a mask. Who gives a shit? She's wearing a mask. Who cares? But they always have to drop these cultural signifiers. Oh, you're wearing a mask. That means you're dubious. That means you're evil. That means you probably want to give every child 8 vaccines. No, they just wore a mask. That's it. They might not have been feeling well. They just like wearing masks in public because they don't want to get sick themselves. Who fucking knows?
I was giving her this book, and she said, I have more of these. I have the graphic novel that I can give you. And he said, no, I'm actually taking this home to my dad. And he said you could see her face just got completely red, and she was nervous.
Yep.
And now he's speaking out to the school board.
Yeah, so the issue of...
Yeah, no shit, because... she came to the realization, this child isn't actually interested in reading and education and expanding their perspective on life through literature. Oh no, he's going to take this to his probably Alex Jones watching father, and who's going to then come yelling at the school about how they gave his son pornography or whatever, even though it's a fucking book. I'm sure they'll show more of it, and I'm sure it's funny, they show the there are laws against showing porn on obviously on cable and stuff like that, right? But they showed the cover of the book. If I remember correctly, I watched through this once before. I'm pretty sure they show a few pages of the book. So what? So it's not so it is pornography, but it can go on cable news. It's not harmful enough to go on cable news, but it is still pornography. Right. Or maybe it's just not pornography, and pornography is just anything they disagree with and anything that they've deemed degenerate or inappropriate, which at the end of the day they're prudes, so it's basically anything. Women not wearing fucking pants all the time, or not wearing fucking jeans 24/7 in all forms of media. That's you know, that's too risque. Like, these people live in like just a different time. Like,
pornography in schools is something I've been discussing for ever since I started my account.
Pornography in schools.
Pornography in schools.
Pornography in schools.
Just that phrase
Not
alone.
something I ever thought I'd say. And like you
Right,
said,
because
so
there is none.
excited. Like, it just makes you wonder, why do these far left activists in our schools want kids to read porn so badly? Like, it's so creepy.
I would love for her to
And
describe
so,
what
you know,
porn
I wrote
is.
a book, and it has really important messages for some of these things that we're seeing in our culture, where they're really targeting children and going after kids.
And hi, we've got the book here, No More Secrets, The Candy Cavern. There you go, there you go. So you started this Libs of TikTok during COVID, and we were talking just off air about that. That's when I started noticing.
Also, keep in mind, people like me, people on the left, we're like, I have like 44 followers on Twitch. I have like 20, maybe 26 subscribers on YouTube. Nobody pays me to do this. I had to buy all of this equipment on my own dime. You know, I have to produce my own show. I have to do all of this stuff. Meanwhile, Chaya Raichik, a person who is, quite frankly, goes on any of these sites, can't describe any of the stuff she's saying. She just says, there's porn in schools. If you asked her, can you show me what is and what isn't porn? Can you describe that for me? Can you like substantiate this claim at all? And also, what it, you know, can you define this and go through the actual process of like identifying, you know, pornography, identifying pornographic images? She wouldn't be able to do it. She wouldn't be able to do it at all. But what does she get? Because she pushes a campaign of hate and, quite frankly, ignorance and stupidity. She gets, you know, however many, yeah, I think she has like, she might have like 1 million like followers on like TikTok. I'm not actually 100% sure, but you know, she's got a huge following on there. Somebody paid her to write some shitty kids book that's like dumb as fuck and uninteresting, and something that no child would be interested in reading, because there's like 10 other books with a much deeper and more interesting message out there, probably a better illustration as well. But like, you know, like the fucking conservative astroturfing is like fucking like, it's how do I put this? It's demoralizing, to be perfectly honest with you, because these people will get paid. These people will be given platforms. Somebody like Brett Cooper will be just given a 1 million subscriber AstroTurf YouTube channel through the Daily Wire to do the exact same dumbass fucking milquetoast nothing commentary on really anything, just be an asshole mean girl basically the whole time. And they'll pay her like, you know, they'll pay her $200,000. They'll pay her more than I get to do this, plus more than what I get to do my normal job. Because as long as you're willing to say the things that like the powerful want you to say, they will pay you to do it. And if you're good enough at it, if you're good enough at lying, if you're good enough at being dishonest, if you're good enough at being fucking stupid, then, you know, you'll be an easy microphone to blast their message through. Like,
you, I was on it during COVID just to connect with my children, but yet you hit a nerve. Why is it so important to address the pornography in school that you have exposed so well?
Well, I think that these far-left activists in our schools, they want to sexualize kids. They want to confuse them about their identity. They want to tear down childhood innocence. And children are the people that we have to protect.
Why won't you think of the children?
Like up until a couple of years ago, that was something that everybody agreed on. It wasn't something that was partisan, and it feels like recently it became partisan. And my book touches on that topic, and my hope.
Wait, your whole like movement is about anti-wokeness, which in and of itself is a counter, a protest against you know, the like liberal ideology, like liberalism, like the tenets of liberalism and progressivism. So like, yeah, it's become partisan because your entire movement is only targeting people who would be liberal and left thereof.
Hope is that not, everybody reads it because it's really not political. It just has a message for parents and children across
It's
America.
not political.
Well,
it just has a message.
Secrets, the Candy Cavern. You have an excerpt that you're willing to read for us this morning. It's right there, or you can read it from the book. Here's the excerpt. Rose raised her hand. "Excuse me, Mr. Woolley, sir. I would love a sweet, but my parents told me I shouldn't eat too much candy at once." No, Mr. Woolley interrupted. "Don't worry, it'll be fine. You should eat as much candy as you want. Your parents will never know. My class is a safe space."
Yeah, like, are we really doing this? Like, we're really doing, like, it's not political, let me use safe space, a political term, a, like, politically charged term. Like, I hate the dishonesty. I really do. The thing that bothers me probably the most is the fucking dishonesty in terms of, like, how specifically conservatives and their, like, their media figures always want to do, and always, like, they always want to play this game like they're not interested in politics, they're not interested in influencing people, they're not interested in partisanship, they're just normal people who just say and do normal things. Meanwhile, they write books like this, and you have, like, Matt Walsh's shitty Walrus book that's just laden with political messaging, political terms, political ideology. No child knows what the fuck a safe space is in terms of politics, but the book is written in a way so that they identify that safe space is dubious, is evil. Like, they even put fucking, I just read, they even fucking put evilly, as if somebody, like, what pros are these? Like, somebody does something evilly? Like, this is obviously not, this isn't written for kids. It's very obvious. This book is not written for kids. It's written for adults to buy because they want to pump up the idea that, like, parents should be disseminating this to their children. Like, this book isn't for kids. No child would read this and think, wow, that was really a lot of ambiguity there, a lot of really letting me draw the picture in my mind. Like,
Mr. Woolley laughed evilly to himself. The thought of hiding something from her parents made Rose feel funny. Her parents always taught her not to keep secrets from them. But before she could think about it more, Mr. Woolley handed her a delicious lollipop.
Like, there's no story in this. There's no story in this. It's just how you're supposed to feel in any situation. Like, very, very thinly narrativized.
Rose decided if her teacher said it was okay, then surely she could eat one little piece, and so she did. The comparison is evident. The teachers in schools don't want parents to know what's going on.
Exactly, and that's a trend that we've been seeing the last few years, which is something that I called out. And this book is really a tool for parents and children to be able to have that conversation.
So at the end of the day, they want to do. So they continue to do, like, the rather obvious lie that it's like, oh no, this is about, like, this is about, like, teachers not, like, kids hiding stuff from their parents, but telling teachers. It's like this, what's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? This, like, betrayal from kids, that they, that they would trust their teachers. Well, let's think about this for a minute. Most of the time, what they're talking about is kids who might be gay or trans or non-binary or whatever tend to share these details with teachers. Now, the reason for that is usually two reasons. One, that teachers are some of the most accessible adults to children. They're constantly around them. They're there for 7 to 8 hours a day, 5 days out of the week. It would be rather obvious that kids would gravitate towards talking to their teachers about, their personal life, or, talk to them about, kind of really anything. If you've ever been a teacher, if you've ever been working at a daycare, kids ask a lot of questions. And, like, most of the questions are, stuff I'm sure they ask their parents, but you kind of get the sense that their parents are like, all right, like, how many more, like, I can't answer every fucking question for you. And, you know, and that's where teachers usually come in. So that's like scenario one. That's like generally you'll see all kids do that. The second case for this is if there are kids who are trans, non-binary, gay, whatever it might be. If you have kids who are in households that are not, accepting of these identities, not accepting of their, like, of them as a person, and they recognize that the adults in their life are hostile towards them because of, you know, because they might be having these thoughts, because they might be, because they might be any of these things, they confide in the only other adult, parental, authoritarian, person in their life, which is going to be a teacher. Now, if you're a teacher and your student is like, hey, Mr. Teacher Man Guy, I've been thinking maybe, my friends might, I have friends who are really into Susie, right? But I'm not into Susie. I think I really like Billy or whatever the fuck, right? And like, but I tried to tell my dad, and he didn't like that at all. He got mad and he yelled at me and da 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 da. What is this parent supposed to do? What do you think should be happening with that child? Do you think this teacher should be like, oh, well, I get that, Tommy, I get that. Well, look, you just hang in there, and you just try to be a normal kid, right? And then what? They go to like the parent, they call up the parent, kid leaves, they call up the parent. Hey, just let you know, I'm pretty sure your son just told me he's gay. And then what? That kid gets what? Beat when he gets home? He gets, verbally assaulted? Like we don't, like, most of the cases that we're talking about that they always want to paint as like grooming, as this or that, is always coming from the parents' incredibly aggressive and usually not far off of abusive relationship to their child in terms of these things. In terms of like, who they might have crushes on, any of that sort of stuff. But like Chaya Raichik and people like her go on Fox News, and they've decided that one of the only resources that any of these kids might have in their life, i.e. teachers, no, we've got to make sure that there isn't one person to make them feel heard and make them feel safe. That's what's fucking evil about this shit. Utterly fucking evil. That being said, I want to take a quick look at kind of, because I've never really done too much of a dive into the actual like libs of TikTok content. So I'm morbidly curious. Why does it do that? I don't know why it does that. I don't know why when I hit full screen, it's like, oh, you want to play the video? No, I want to go full screen. But I am kind of curious to see what exactly, what the actual content is. Like I've seen some of it. I've seen the big, the ones that everybody's kind of seen that she's targeted. But I kind of want to, this is, I guess, some compilation of her life's work, which, man, talk about fucking disgraceful. Anyway. Christ, I love this. Is so fucking loud. We're turning this down a lot.
Hi, my name's Dochi with 2 eyes. I feel anxious when I'm high.
All right, so we saw a person doing a song. I love how they have to cut off like right there. So like, this is what I mean with the framing stuff. Like, she has to cut off because nobody in that interaction, the grandkid, didn't seem all that inconvenienced. The old dude was like perfectly fine with being like, oh yeah, that's right, they're not a her. Is it it? And they're like they, and they're like, right, they. Like, okay, we're gonna. I don't think I can do this for very long because this is just like.
If hyperrealism is what you're going for, get a silicone packer. But if you'd rather prioritize
Activist sells underwear.
Sustainability and supporting trans artisans, get one of these. They're super lightweight, sweat and odor repellent, machine washable, zero
Cool.
waste, and can be safety pinned to underwear so they don't move around. And there's a sliding scale price range. DM me on Insta to order.
So capitalism? There's a market demand for an item. You can say like, oh, you're not allowed to sell that, but like to me, I can't help but just be like, do we have laws written that you can't sell random garment modifications? Like, I'm sorry, I did not realize that was a thing that like suddenly we can't sell now. Also, okay, who cares? People can buy it or not buy it.
So I've been getting this question more and more about my pronouns. Basically, you just use them as they, but instead of the TH, it's a V.
Cool.
They, them, their, themselves.
Did this person play like Cyberpunk 2077 and was like, I really got into being V, so like,
Or
okay.
if that's still a little bit confusing, here's like the example of every form of it in a sentence.
Hopefully that's not too confusing. Can you imagine being a person who's like, I could not possibly even conceptually understand how to say they, but with a V sound instead? Like, this is the level of like when we talk, like, understand like the extreme rhetoric that like Chaya Raichik, people like that, are constantly pushing. Is this like the left is forcing you to do this, that, or the other, whatever it might be? But did you notice it's always like this really extreme, really like immediate language of like, it's happening right now and they're forcing you to do it right now. And then you like watch the video and it's somebody who's like, yeah, I use they, but with a V instead of the TH. It's not hard. I mean, sure. Like, is this the like the crippling downfall, the weight bearing down on your brain that you can't remember, that you're like, oh, I could never think of how to say they or V or them or whatever. I couldn't perceive it. Like, it's not hard. And also, it's also not illegal. Like, nobody's passing a law saying you have to like you have to use this person's very specific to themselves pronouns, and it's fine. It really, crazy idea. You can just go about your life, and if you never meet this person, because let me tell you right now, 99% of the world is not going to meet this person, and they're never going to have to think about this. This is only for like what, the 100 people in their life probably that like actually needs to hear this, and this is an easy way to get it out to as many people as possible. Like, it's just like, this isn't this, I'm sorry, but this isn't like if this is intimidating to you, if this is like, oh my god, earth shattering, oh my god, Thanos is coming, like, you need help. Like you need help assessing like where the world is.
I see this like sentence example thing a lot for most pronouns, so hopefully that's not too confusing.
I think gender ideology.
Yeah, and it's like you say they, but instead you say they. Whoa, fucking so difficult.
In general, is very narcissistic. It's like, these are my pronouns. This is my gender. Let me talk to you about how.
It's first of all, I know somebody who's probably a proponent of capitalism is not complaining about somebody owning their pronouns, right? Like, I know we're not making that complaint. You can't do that when like there are people who fucking like own factories where people work and create products. There are people who own pieces of land. If we want to talk about ownership, like let's take it easy.
How I want to be referred to and how you should refer to me.
God forbid.
And the whole idea of an app where you go online and you...
One second, I wanna.
Hopefully that's not too...
I think gender ideology in general. These are my pronouns. This is my gender. Let me talk to you about how I want to be referred to and how you should refer to me. And
what's narcissistic about that? I'm pretty sure Chaya Raichik would like to be referred to as a woman, right? Like, that's how she would like to be referred to, right? Is it narcissism when you would like to be referred to by the way that you prefer to be referred? Like, is that narcissism? Is it? Like, or is narcissism just when you're not right wing? Like, let's be honest here.
And the whole idea of an app where you go online and you just film yourself talking, I think that it's a really good match, those activists and TikTok, because TikTok is really a platform for narcissists.
Today I sit down with
said the narcissist.
Chaya Raichik, creator of the viral Twitter account Libs of TikTok. She was doxxed in a controversial Washington Post article last year.
They create this content and then I put it out there in their own words, and they don't really want us to see it. They want it.
Well, that's not exactly accurate. You reframe whatever they're saying, and what's the word? And what's the word? Yeah. I mean, she basically reframes whatever they're saying, and then like kind of skews it in a way that makes whoever filmed it to look as bad as possible. To which, at the end of the day, these people have all the right to film whatever the fuck they want. Like, they're allowed. Like,
they just live in their bubble.
I didn't know I could do that on full screen mode.
So
I didn't know that.
This content and they just can't handle it.
But I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. I am fucking tired of TERFs making a mockery of real women. Oh, what? You were born with ovaries? You bleed every month? You have XX chromosomes? Yeah, that's cute. Tell me what other external factor that doesn't apply to all of you defines you. At the end of the day, you're out here thinking that trans women are making a mockery of you when it's the exact opposite. You were...
So this is the understanding, and I think I've said this before. This is the understanding that, like, getting a period, having ovaries, none of these things, if you took all of these things away from a woman who had XX chromosomes, you wouldn't then say to her, oh, so now, you don't have this, you don't have that, and you don't, like, there isn't a disqualifying number of things that, like, suddenly you're not a woman, right? Like, the whole idea is like, the whole idea is like, okay, you can have this, and this, that makes you a female, absolutely. But when we say woman does not, being a woman is not about birthing kids, is not about having children. Because if it was, then we would, then there would already, then how do we refer to women who've chosen to not have kids? How do we refer to women who can't have kids? Are they no longer women? Because you can't argue that I'm a woman because I can birth children, and then say, okay, so women who can't birth children, who don't or choose not to, they're not women then, because that's the line that you've drawn. Birthing children is what makes or breaks you a woman. Most of them would say, no, that's not true. What makes me a woman is like, and list off a bunch of other bullshit, which it's accurate. That's accurate. Being a woman is about more than your chromosomes. It's about more than your organs. It's about more than a lot of those things. It's about playing a certain type of role in society. And usually there are secondary characteristics that also what's the word I'm looking for? Reinforce your gender. Okay. Anyway.
Pretending that you know that you're a woman when the only people here who know that for sure are the ones who have put in the work to understand themselves, the trans women. You have put zero work into actually understanding yourself. You are only a woman because everybody else around you looked at these same external factors that you look at and said, seems like woman behavior to me. And you went, all right. The only person making a mockery
God
of woman
damn.
is you because you do not fully understand what makes you a woman. Stop harassing trans women. I don't even identify as a woman, and I'm more of a woman than you. It's okay to be
damn fucking base,
but don't take it out on people who aren't even a fucking threat.
God damn, bruh. Jesus. I gotta say, that was rather poignant. Yeah, like, I didn't find anything objectionable about any of that. When it comes down to it, like, most TERFs, like, get really in their feelings about the woman thing because they've been told that they are a woman, that they are like that they're like, oh, you have long hair and you like getting your nails done and you have boobs and you can bear children. So obviously you're a woman. And those are the things that they've identified as like, oh yeah, so that's how I've defined myself as a woman. When again, like, there are millions of women around the world who define themselves by very different societal identifiers.
I know why y'all recording for when she said something.
Wait, is this supposed to be Libs of TikTok?
I'm at the Walgreens on Main Street. Can you send a police officer over here? These individuals are stealing the makeup.
So
there's like 2 people here stealing the makeup at the store.
Notice how they've lumped in like a trans person, some LGBT folks, with like just 2 people robbing a store. Notice
No
that.
shame
Interesting.
whatsoever. It's a man and a woman. Yeah, one already walked out with a bag full, and the other one's in here. The woman is taking it. She's all dressed in blue. Now she's the male walked out. Now the female's walking out.
Like, what does this have to do with trans people or liberals? I can't wait. Tell me what this has to do with trans or liberals. Literally nothing. So literally nothing then. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Last night, the something had a Pride night, which featured a drag performance on the ice during the game. Okay, after the game, all attendees were treated to another drag show to watch a sexually charged drag performance. So, like, a dance? So, okay, let's start with this really quickly. Do you see any nudity in here? This person is wearing more clothing than I currently am. I'm wearing shorts and like rolled up sleeves, and I didn't even do this button. You're seeing like, okay. Yeah, again, like, everyone's wearing clothes. You're right, sexually charged, as in dancing. Whoa. They're wearing a big hat, oh my god. They're also dancing again. Like, this is what I mean, where it's just like, what does this have to, like, what's the sexual part of this? If you think this is sexual, then like, I'm sorry, but like, we need to throw you into a hot tub time machine and send your ass back to like the fucking like 1910s then. Like I'm sorry, but like, we're past this. We already had this debate about like sexuality and what constitutes explicit sexual behavior in public. Like, none of this is any different than you'd see at any major concert, the fucking Super Bowl. Like, none of this is unique. Why is grown-ass people hanging out with children? 'Cause they're other humans. Are you dumb? Have you ever been to a park, a public setting at all? Yes! There's like these things called schools, summer camps. Like, whoa, crazy. Whoa, crazy.
In fact, living in a tent, and it's been a wild.
The idea that people are responsible for their own well-being is tied to white percent. Okay. Oh, wait. If you can't afford to pay rent, go live in a tent at the park. Landlords don't owe you a roof over your head if you can't afford. I'm assuming it's supposed to be it. So that's public property. You can't really go hang it. You can't really do that in. I mean, I know some parks in some areas will let people camp in them because it's a park, it's a public zone, but there's usually a certain limit to how much you can do that. But anyway, let me restart this so I actually hit the.
This time last year, I was in fact living in a tent, and
Oh, Vampire Hunter, I know you love children. I know you're very interested in children. You're really more just upset that there are other people talking to children when you would be the one who would much prefer to be around children. I get it.
been a wild fucking ride from there to now, because, like, you know, tomorrow I move into the home that I fucking own, right? Which is wild for me as well, because, like, I genuinely, and this is, I think people don't really get this, but I genuinely believe the shit that I say. Like, this down to my fucking gut.
No, right,
I don't,
right.
the abolition of private property is, like, my number one fucking aim, right? That's just all I fucking want to do. Personal property is fine. You can have your fucking personal property. Private property, let's just do away with all of that fucking shit, because it leads to fascism. This, what you've done, is called fascism. And I know that that's a confusing term for some people, and I'm going to have a whole bunch of, you know, straw man.
I don't know if that's I'm not sure if that's really fascism. That's mostly just capitalism. But I think I get the sentiment she's going for. But, you know.
In the thing going, oh my God, that's a fascism, you're overreacting. No. In terms of economic theory, fascism is the genuine belief that individuals are responsible for their own well-being and welfare. And that...
Wait, is that fascism? I'm sorry, that's like capitalism, is it not? Okay.
If you're suffering and struggling, that's on you. And that thought line, that pattern of thought, also has really strong ties to white supremacy, has really strong ties to eugenics theories, and pops up a lot in Christian movements. It's really weird how all of these tools of colonization are dangerous for all of us.
Again, I would identify this as capitalism, not fascism, but, you know, I'll allow it for now.
Keep popping up in the same sorts of groups over and over and over again, who have historically made it their mission to make the lives of people of colour fucking horrendous. So, funny, but not funny. Funny, what the actual fuck, Stephanie?
What is emoji self? Emoji self is a gender neutral
People are using emojis as pronouns because emojis better reflect their gender identity.
Form of neo-pronouns, where an individual will replace a pronoun with an emoji. Now, this is primarily only through text or through written communication, because you cannot express an emoji in person, but an individual will replace their pronouns with an emoji. So in their bio, instead of having he, him, they, she, they will have an emoji. But what emojis will they use, and why do they do this? Let's talk about it. Like noun self, which is another, you know, video I can make, individuals will choose an emoji that best reflects them and their gender identity, or will pick an emoji that they just like. It's as simple as that. And they can have a multitude of emojis that they use depending on maybe if they're feeling more femme one day, more man.
Let me say, I fucking hate emojis and the proliferation of them, but it's utterly harmless.
One day, more androgynous one day, or just because they like a
I just realized I've seen this Vampire Hunter do that
emojis
before.
that they use
What a fucking
interchangeably in text. There's no rules about emoji self. You can just pick whatever you want to use. Some people may keep the emojis in similar themes, so maybe all fruits, or maybe all sports, or maybe all clothing. And some people just have fun with it and choose as many wild and crazy emojis as they like to replace their pronouns through text communication. So this is what a emoji self conversation may look like with somebody who uses emojis instead of pronouns. This is just one example, but I wanted to share it with you. And obviously,
it's a strawberry. Are they like strawberry has to? That's fun. You can't
use these emojis in conversation because that doesn't work.
Naturally.
However, individuals who use
What if your
emoji
name is
self may
strawberry?
have alternative words that reflect to the emojis. So, for example, off the top of my head, if they use a rainbow emoji, they may use the word rainbow in place of a pronoun in a conversation. Or if they use an emoji of a cat, they may use cat as a pronoun in conversation. So create an alternative word that reflects the emoji,
like just a name,
but isn't you happen to act out the emoji, because that'd be a bit uncomfortable. I'm glad you.
Why not go all the way? Again, what's the harm? It comes down to every single time. It's like, all right, cool. What's the harm? What's the like? Do I like? Would I do that? No, not really. But like, if somebody like was a friend of mine and they were like, hey, I'd appreciate if you like talk to me like this over text or use this whatever, I'd be like, sure, it's fine. You know, be like slightly inconvenient, but there's like way worse things in the world.
You asked, let's talk about it. So transgender and the way you identify in it can be very heavily based on your culture and your cultural background.
Right.
For example, I know in Hawaiian culture, there are 3 genders. There's a third gender. I forget what it's called. I'm sorry, but if you
I think I've heard that before. There
Hawaiian,
are like indigenous communities or like native communities that that were what's the word I'm looking for? That expanded outside of the gender binary. It's actually kind of I haven't looked into a lot of it, but I've heard about that. It sounds certainly interesting. At the end of the day, genders are socially constructed, so it doesn't really matter.
You could identify as that third gender and then man and woman. Or if you happen to be, you know, from Native Hawaiian background and on the other side you have a different background that also has a third gender, you can identify as those 2 non-binary genders. And then take your pick if you want man or woman or not even another non-binary gender.
Right.
But all in all, it comes from your cultural background. So for me, I come from a very heavy Dutch background and American background. So for me, it's more based on if there's man on one side, woman on the other, and non-binary is somewhere in the middle, and then I take up that whole area, the whole bar there. And I know for a lot of people, non-binary is a completely separate spectrum, and that's just not my experience, but I still think that that's a valid experience to have. It all depends.
Jeez, this is so incomprehensible. Like, it's not that complicated. It's really not. The gender binary, like the gender binary is a Western civilization creation. Is like, depending on what culture you're coming from, your gender, like the options for genders, if you're in, we'll just say Europe in like the US, right? If we're going by those, it's gonna be man or woman. They just have 2 in those cultures, right? If you're like Hawaiian, then you have 3. So it's this, and whatever the fuck the other third one is. You know, it's man, woman, and whatever the third one is. It might not even be man, woman, and the third thing. It might be 3 of them that are completely different cultural contexts for what kind of gendered individuals that they have. But like this isn't that hard to understand. I don't know why people pretend like this stuff is that hard. Is it like, does it take like 2 extra brain cells? Yes, it does. I luckily have 2 extra brain cells to spare. Conservatives like Vampire Hunter D, who's too much of a coward to stay in chat or get on Discord and debate me on any of this stuff, they do not have 2 brain cells to spare. They are unfortunately lacking in brain cells and owe somebody currently some brain power. That's how in debt they are of brain power.
And your personal history, you know? I hope this answers your question. Let me know if you...
Jeez. Man. You would think that, like, if it's something teenagers could, like, conceptually understand, it wouldn't be so fucking hard for conservatives. But unfortunately, that's just the world we live in. Okay. Let's see. Let me go grab some water, and then we're going to come back and do the... Let me think. I think we're going to skip... Yeah, we're going to skip this for today, just because... What time is it? It's 36. Okay. Yeah. We'll skip this for today. We'll do that tomorrow. And no, I said we should probably... I did say we should probably cover that. Okay. Sorry, let me make sure. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna, yeah. Okay, I got the order. So we're gonna come back. We're gonna watch the Charlie Sean video, or whatever the fuck his name is. and then quickly go over this whole hormone therapy thing, and then hopefully, actually, we might skip the Charlie thing. Yeah, we're gonna skip that. We're gonna go straight to hormone therapy, then go into education system, then we're done for the night. Sound good? Sound good? Cool. Sounds good to me. Oh yeah. If you're, I'm all about choice here. So if you so choose, I would certainly appreciate it if you've enjoyed any of what you've seen, or if you've gotten any catharsis out of it, learned anything, just kind of enjoyed hanging out. I would implore you to hit that follow button down under the video if you're watching on Twitch, and hit the subscribe button if you're watching over at YouTube. It really helps out the channel, helps out me. I do this about 3 times a week at 7 o'clock Mountain Time every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And with enough followers, with enough subscribers, then maybe that can turn into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Maybe with enough, we turn that into Monday through Friday. Maybe Monday through Saturday. Who knows? But we won't get there unless you hit that button. So do that. I'm going to get some water, and I'll be back. Just hang out for like a minute or two. All right. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. What did I say we're doing? I know I have a terrible memory. Oh, right, the hormone therapy thing. Right, I do want to go over this. Okay. So, I want to watch this. Kind of just go over it. I already have the article pulled up, so I want to read that as well as we kind of engage with this. But either way, so let me kind of intro this as best I can. One of the prevailing arguments that conservatives have been fronting as a way to, let's be honest, obfuscate their transphobia has been through the...
This important report from our Daily Watch.
I'm so tired, Facebook or fucking YouTube. Holy shit. Can you please... Is there like a setting that I can do that's like every time I full screen? Like, fucking Jesus. Where was I? Fuck, see, and that distracted the fuck out of me. Right. The argument, so something that they have been kind of concern trolling about when it comes to trans people, through their campaign, they've been trying to target trans healthcare providers and kind of trying to find a way to justify the refusal of medical care to trans people. They've gone about this in violent ways, which bear out with, bomb threats to children's hospitals, amongst all the other things that they usually end up doing. That sort of stuff. They do it in terms of, sorry, I'm just fixing this really quick. They do this in terms of, we just watch Libs of TikTok and then kind of target, teachers and any kind of like safe haven that one could have as a trans person, as a, not as a non-heterosexual cis person, whatever. They've made sure they've been making this attempt to basically make living in the United States, living in any kind of community, just that shade of difficult enough to get you to go back into the closet, right? And a part of that, as we said, was a line of attack that they've been using lately, has been the administering, I guess, of puberty blockers, of hormone therapy. Now, puberty blockers and actual hormone therapy are a bit different in that one is testosterone and estrogen pushing you towards certain development, whereas puberty blockers are the basically pausing of your development. But the difference is kind of lost on Matt Walsh and those like him, because they're not really interested in the difference. They're interested in making sure that trans kids get nothing. They don't get any kind of care. They are left to develop how they would like to not develop and deal with the consequences later if they want to transition. And even then, Matt Walsh and the rest of them aren't actually supportive or really would tolerate a world where trans adults existed. They have no interest in trans adults existing, as we already saw with the Vampire D in chat over here. Anybody who's an adult who's like, not like basically a normie white guy is like a groomer to these people. So like, at the end of the day, they come about this with one simple, singular goal, and it's to make trans people as uncomfortable and unintegrated into our society as humanly possible. A way they've gone about that is through the ostensibly scientific route. There's always the like science concerned people who, they're just concerned about these sorts of things. And I saw this, I think this popped up on one of my like Google feeds or whatever. But apparently there are a not huge study, but a study. It's a study. It's real. Done by a cardiovascular group. I guess found that people who take hormone therapy have a higher propensity of risk for certain cardiovascular issues. So let's go take a look. I want to hear this from the angry horse's mouth. So let's kind of hear how Matt Walsh frames it, and then we're going to actually read the article really quickly. It's not that long, so let's go.
This important report from Daily Wire: transgender patients who undergo hormone.
Oh, this is only a 3-minute video. I'm stupid. We don't need all this speed.
Therapy have a significantly increased risk of serious health problems such as stroke, heart attack, and pulmonary embolism.
Would be helpful if you could see.
A new study presented at an American College of Cardiology conference found that transgender patients who take cross-sex hormones had an increased risk of dangerous blood clots that can create blockages in the brain, heart, and lungs. The study found the subjects had nearly 7 times the risk of stroke, 6 times the risk of the most...
I also, by the way, there's also a reason why I said we're going to read the article later. And that's mainly because I'm not 100% secure in the idea that Matt Walsh is going to read all of it, to which there's some nuance to it. But I'm just not sure if he's going to adhere to that nuance.
Severe type of heart attack, nearly 5 times the risk of pulmonary embolism compared to those with gender dysphoria who never used hormone therapy. Dr. Ibrahim Ahmed said it's all about risks and benefits. Starting transitioning is a big part of a person's life and helping them feel more themselves. But hormone replacement therapy also has a lot of side effects. It's not a risk-free endeavor.
So, like, literally every drug you've ever taken. Understand that, like, the stuff that he's describing also, you can usually find as possible side effects to really a lot of over-the-counter drugs. Drugs in general, there's always risks to taking any of it. So also keep that in mind.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought just injecting hormones into someone?
I knew it. This video is so short. There's no way you could have read all of it.
To try to bring their body into a line with their perception of themselves.
Imagine.
Who would have thought that it would have...
Imagine. Matt Walsh, who wears glasses and wears a flannel shirt. Who thought that people would align themselves physically to match how they feel mentally?
Catastrophic long-term health effects. So everything we've heard from the media and from the medical establishment, they've been insisting this for years. They've been telling it to parents and kids and patients also who are not kids.
See? Notice that. They'll scream and screech all day about how it's only about the kids, how they're only interested in minors, how this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, he'll throw that little dig in because he doesn't believe adults should be able to choose this for themselves. No. Adults can't choose to be trans. Unacceptable to Matt Walsh.
I'm saying it's entirely safe. It's completely safe.
Literally no one's ever said that before.
It's all nonsense. They are lying.
I think like I had this conversation also last week with somebody where we were talking about kind of the effect. And I think I mentioned that as of now, at the time that we were talking, and that was like Thursday, this article came out on the 23rd, which was, when was that? Oh, it was actually Thursday. So we didn't actually see it until like just now. But up until that moment, there really hasn't been any long form studies in terms of the risks or the side effects. There are like some studies, but most of them point to pretty uninteresting side effects. Like none of them really point to anything that's like, oh yeah, this is like dangerous. It's like, there's a few changes that might happen when taking puberty blockers, but like nothing super crazy, nothing that like anybody that like doctors would feel concerned about.
Always been saying they couldn't even, there's no way for them to know that in the first place. Because this is experimental, what we're doing now.
It is?
And it's never been done on this scale, anything close to this scale before in history.
We've given people hormones
before. And so the people that we're doing it to now, they're undergoing the quote unquote medical transition.
Right.
They are the test subjects. So we know to begin with, anything they say about it's safe, it's long-term, there's no way to know that. You can't possibly know that.
Well, yeah, you would, again, all evidence so far points to the analysis that hormones and puberty, all this stuff, isn't that harmful, that obviously there are going to be side effects. I think with this study, it's like, yeah, there's obviously side effects. There's side effects to surgery. There's side effects to there's side effects to everything. There's side effects to Advil. There's side effects to Tylenol. Like, all of this stuff always had side effects. The question is, like, how dangerous is it?
However, we can know, again, using our common sense, that it's obviously dangerous to do. And there are consequences. Anytime you put a chemical into somebody's body, there are consequences for it. It's never consequences. So whenever you hear a claim, there's no problem at all, no consequences, that's a huge red flag. Run the other direction. Because there are always going to be consequences.
Wait. Consequences or side effects? Consequences are consequences is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Like, consequences is literally anything. The consequence of you taking estrogen is you get big titties. But, like, does that mean, like, that sounds bad, but what if you wanted big titties? Then that's not a consequence. It is a consequence, but you're like, yeah, it's a consequence I want. Like, okay.
Okay, there are side effects to taking Tylenol. There are dangers of taking Tylenol. So
yeah.
And when you're injecting hormones,
so it's almost like hormones are like everything else
obviously it's not a risk
medicine does.
Not anything close to that. But now, since we've been doing this to people for at a pretty large scale for several years now, that's when we're now going to really start to see. So now they have, they've got their crop of test subjects.
More people,
And now we're starting to get the results. And this is...
Okay, cool. I figured he wouldn't provide the context, so I will. All right, let's take a look really quickly. This isn't a very long article either. Okay, but I'm not going to read all of it. We're going to move down. The current study is the largest to date, examining the cardiovascular risk of gender affirmation therapy in this historically understudied population. Previous research on hormone modulating medications. By the way, this is the exact study. It's the American College of Cardiology. This is the exact study I was able to find, luckily. The current study is large focus in these populations. Long-term hormone replacement therapy has been associated with an increased risk of breast cancer, stroke, and blood clots. Okay. Actually, I should read the sentence before that. Previous research on hormone modulating medications has primarily focused on younger women using hormone-based birth control or on older women following a hysterectomy or during menopause. In these populations, long-term hormone replacement has been associated with increased risk of breast cancer, stroke, and blood clots. Then out of context, that sounds very bad. Researchers retrospectively examined rates of cardiovascular events in 21,000 people with gender dysphoria from a national database of hospital records, to whom 1,675 had used hormone replacement therapy. Wow, that's a very small batch. Typically, people assigned male at birth received estrogen, and people who assigned female at birth received testosterone. Overall, the results found hormone replacements were associated with higher rates of cardiac events, mostly related to dangerous blood clots, but were not associated with higher rates of death. It's all about, quote, it's all about risks and benefits. Transitioning is a big part of a person's life, helping them feel more themselves. I think he already read this in the video. People feel good. In the study, people with gender dysphoria who had ever used hormone replacement saw nearly 7 times the risk of stroke, nearly 6 times the risk of ST elevation myocardial infarction, the most serious type of heart attack, and nearly 5 times the risk of pulmonary embolism, compared with people with gender dysphoria who had never used hormone replacements. Hormone replacement therapy was not associated with any increase in deaths from any cause or with increased rates of atrial fibrillation, diabetes, hypertension, hemorrhagic stroke, or heart failure. God damn, these are big words. Both estrogen and testosterone are known to increase the clotting activity of blood, which could explain the increase of clotting-related cardiovascular events. Researchers said those taking hormone replacement therapy also had higher rates of substance use disorder and hypothyroidism. Well, looking at a person's medical and family history should definitely be part of the screening protocol before they even start hormone replacement therapy. So, I know I'm reading actually probably a little bit more than I was going to initially, but notice, so the way they also did this study was going through like records over a like what seems like a maybe 10, maybe 5 years. We don't know exactly what the what the parameters were basically, but obviously they went back. They didn't start doing this in like 2023 or over the last couple of months. This is over a longer stretch of time and back in the past, right? But also what it seems like also a key to this is that they didn't factor out people's medical history and people's families' history. And we'll also see later they also didn't factor out another couple a couple other elements that I think are important. So while these numbers are like, oh, okay, so it seems like hormone therapy could that could lead to some bad outcomes. Granted, it was only out of the 21,000, there was like 1,600 something. But it's not. If hormone therapy has severe side effects, then obviously we need to find a different way to treat those people, to get those people to the place where they're at. But let's just keep reading. So let's see. One limitation of the study is that it only accounted for whether individuals had ever used any type of hormone replacement therapy. To better inform clinical decisions, researchers said it would be helpful to assess whether the duration of treatment, the age at which be helpful to assess whether the duration of treatment, the age at which it is initiated, or the type of hormone therapy used affects the risks. I quote, I'm curious to see the method of administration. Alters the outcomes. Is one way of giving hormone replacement therapy better or associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular outcomes? If so, then we should focus. If so, then that should be the focus of how we give these patients their hormone replacement therapy going forward. So also depending on how they actually give it, and again, when, like, all these sorts of things are all going to factor into how these drugs are affecting people. So in addition to considering ways to mitigate potential cardiovascular risks before starting hormone replacement therapy for individual patients, researchers said it will be important to continue to study potential long-term cardiovascular and other health effects of gender affirmation therapies as the use of these therapies become more common. So, in summary, the actual study did not control for certain factors that I think are pretty important. You do kind of want to have clean, or at least as clean as you can get, medical histories, along with better data in terms of being able to differentiate between different amounts of use and different amounts of application of these drugs. But, and like, this shouldn't really be shocking to anybody. If you've watched Matt Walsh, it shouldn't be super shocking to find out that he's not super interested in that, is he? Mostly, I get the sense that Matt Walsh saw the headline, saw those numbers, and that's it. And that's all he presented to his audience. He only presented up to the point, let's see, I bet I could actually find the point at which he stopped. Because he said, no. What did he say? Let's see. I remember him. He quoted all the what's it called? Yeah. Where did he stop quoting? Because I know he quoted the helping them feel, because he quoted this like a bit, starting transition is a big part of a person's health, all this stuff, right? Because at the end of the day, what he wants to identify is like doctors who are like not thinking the science through. They're not thinking about, oh, thanks, I'm Idaho. I appreciate that. But he's not he wants to put you in the mind state of like, oh, these doctors, maybe they mean well. Maybe. But like, they haven't done the science. They don't know the side effects. This stuff is dangerous. They're putting kids at risk and all the rest of this stuff. When, if you read the article, we read most of it together. It's kind of like, we need more information. We need to find out if the results that we initially found aren't being biased and kind of pushed in certain direction based on factors that we didn't account for. At the end of the day, any study without like control groups, or any study that doesn't like at the very least attempt to bring in line all of its like patients or all of its data set is, I'm not going to say like, it's not going to say like awful or like not good information, but it's incomplete data. And even in this article, like they make it very clear that they need more data and that they need more specific and more like tuned in data. But again, you know, Matt Walsh isn't interested in that. And if you might be a, you know, if you might be like a Matt Walsh viewer or anything like that, I only implore you to ask yourself, like, why did he leave this part out? Like, I get that he left in the like, oh, it caught it, you know, people who were on like hormone therapy were, you know, 6 times this, 5 times this, 7 times that, whatever the numbers were. I don't remember off the top of my head, but like never told you like also the people who came out with this report. And really, it's not really a report. It was a presentation, it looks like. But like even the people who studied this came to the conclusion that they're like, we found these factors, but we didn't control for anything. So we need to do more tweaking and stuff. So it's like, the question I just want you to ask yourself is like, why was that left out? If he's really concerned and interested in the medical consensus, the medical opinion of any of this stuff, then why did he leave out the part where they said they don't have a definitive answer? And why was he so fast to jump on his definitive answer, the one that he's been saying this entire time? So always keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind. But anyway, okay, so I think we're on to the last topic, are we not? Yeah. Okay. U.S. education system. Does anybody think the U.S. education system is like great? I feel like the one thing everyone can kind of agree on is that the education system in the United States is a bit flawed. Part of that comes from the way that we fund our schools, and part of that also comes from, I think, like, or at the very least, that is a downstream effect of us not really prioritizing education in this country. You know, because tertiary education or college is pretty much, you know, is what's the word I'm looking for, is paywalled behind, you know, thousands upon thousands of dollars for you to get a, you know, tertiary education. It means just naturally some people are going to get less of an education. And, you know, with the schools in our neighborhoods always being funded, I don't know why I said always, but being funded by, you know, by the housing tax dollars that you and other homeowners pay, since that's how it's funded, is it a wonder why schools around the nation fluctuate from well-funded to not funded at all? Like, you know, it's kind of a wonder. But it seems like Vice got a group of conservatives and liberals to debate some of this. So I'm kind of curious to see how this works out. I am a child of a pretty good educational county. I grew up and went to school in Fairfax County. It's like one of the better counties in the country from what I understand. So like, you know, I've seen like good like educational environments, but you know, as I moved, you know, I've moved from my hometown and I see other schools here in Colorado, and you can kind of tell which ones are getting the funding and which ones aren't. So and you can see the neighborhoods around them, what those end up kind of creating, the kind of situations that those create. But anyway, let's go take a look. Also, I'm definitely gonna put this is kind of on the longer end, so we're definitely gonna do 1.25.
The privilege discussion, like that's a great conversation for you to have with your child. But I don't think that taxpayer-funded hatred should be something that we allow in our schools.
Okay, bro, real talk though, like brother
JK,
to brother. Teaching white privilege does not inherently mean black people are less. Factually incorrect.
Somebody went to a good school.
SATs.
No, wait. Gotta be careful.
I'm Mina Durson. I'm a correspondent here at Vice News, and we're going to talk about education today. We tried to bring a very diverse mix of voices here. Obviously, we're not going to be able to represent every single opinion out there when it comes to education, but we are really thankful for your time and for your perspectives. I also have 2 kids in school, so have experienced some of this from the parent side as well. So let's just start really broadly. What's the purpose of education?
I think the purpose of education is twofold. One, to help build and support the individual, but also help build and support society as a whole, because even though you may not have a kid in education, you pay taxes to public school, because we as a society depend on and need education for society to work.
I think the purpose of education is to educate and not indoctrinate. And I think that in a lot of ways we've strayed from that.
What a fucking idiot. You do know that all... Are we really going to start out with this? All education is indoctrination, you fucking idiot. Would you like to know why? It's actually rather simple. She already said this. The point of having a public education system is to create citizens within your society. And we do that through the propagation of values that we teach our kids. As a kid, you're taught in school, don't steal, don't hit people, don't lie, be kind, make friends. Like you're taught all of these societally aligned values, along with history, math. Half of schooling anywhere is the social training that you get. And then the other half is the raw education. But some of the best stuff you get out of school is understanding how to exist in the society you are going to be living in, and more importantly, working in.
The original purpose of what it's supposed to be.
I think it should be intelligence and character. I think you should be able to understand the world around you and understand who you are and your purpose, and try to make the world a better place.
Character is always determined by what
memorizing the formulas,
society you live in,
understanding the world around you, but then also
determines is most valuable.
The idea that education, you have to balance the importance of memorizing the quadratic formula while simultaneously addressing social and political issues respectively, so children have both the know-how, general knowledge, and also kind of self-awareness and character.
I love this person's this fucking color combo. I love this. You got the dark blue with the purple and then the pink. Solid.
Yeah, I think that the purpose of education is to understand the world that you exist in and use that understanding as a means for creating change or even understanding yourself on a deeper level.
I believe the purpose is simply just to prepare the individual to be successful in the society that they exist in.
Critical thinking, learn how to live out your full potential so you can be independent, and everything else really flows from there.
The purpose of education is to prepare children for the real life and also make sure that they are literate.
So I think the purpose is to raise the next generation of leaders. And when you think about what you want your leader
what a public school teacher answer.
to be like, you want them to be knowledgeable, and you want them to be compassionate, you want them to be self-aware, you want them to understand the best way to move forward, not just for themselves personally,
man,
but for
what a public school answer.
Who's doing the educating? Who should decide what's being taught?
Parents. I think that parents should have a huge say in what's going on in the classroom, because it's their kids, not ours.
So in that case, homeschool your fucking kids. So okay, so what do you do when a parent is like, I don't like black people, you can't teach equality? What? We just throw our hands up and go all right, I guess this kid I guess he goes to the other room to write the if you to go write the N-word in his notebook while we learn about the civil rights movement. How would we accommodate this? And the answer is we don't. We have a standard that we teach across the nation that gives the most amount of kids the most amount of education they can without pissing off every single person in the country. Unfortunately, conservatives are never not pissed about something, but still, we can't accommodate this. We can't accommodate every parent's biases into thousands upon millions of kids' educations, let alone the hundreds in their school.
public school teacher 15 years,
What's up, Marky?
I was always aware that these are not my children. We have to make sure that we're respecting parents and their beliefs and their values.
I think the Constitution agrees with that.
Yes.
Here in America, ranging back to the early 1900s, plenty of Supreme Court cases have ruled
The 1900s.
that it is the
They were
parents'
founded in the
right ultimately
1700s.
to decide a child's
This guy's
education,
a homeschooler?
medical needs, etc.
I would push back though and say that there does need to be collaboration, right? I completely respect your idea of it is not our job as educators to put forth a belief in front of children, right? That includes not perpetuating parents' beliefs in the classroom as well. In my opinion, that would be keeping a non-biased viewpoint, simply
You're always
presenting
teaching
issues,
beliefs
and then
to those
allowing
kids.
kids to decide for themselves.
I would agree that I think it needs to be a collaborative effort. The way that we decide curriculum in Texas is that work groups comprised of community members, educators, parents, even in some cases students and public service officials come together to draft curriculum plans, and then it's ultimately decided on by our State Board of Education, which has a lot of kind of assistance from parents as well. So I think that kind of format can be really effective because it also empowers students to become—
I don't hate that. I actually like the idea of students being involved in their own education, in terms of at least driving like towards what they're interested in.
involved in the fate of their education. As a student myself, I think that that's incredibly important because our perspectives need to be heard as well.
The voices of parents need to be heard in that equation, but unfortunately what we've seen recently is that parents' voices have been demonized in this process. You've seen parents who've criticized local school boards labeled terrorists simply for caring about the quality of their education that their child is receiving. These teachers are temporary caretakers.
The ones who show up and scream and yell and threaten violence.
In front of you.
Yeah,
this was this idea
that would be terrorism.
Raised around that parent now has to explain. And at the end of the day, that isn't just confined to a classroom. Now it's bleeding into their upbringing, and there's only one person responsible for their upbringing, and that's the parents. It's not the educators, not the teachers.
You know what I'm really tired of? I'm really tired of parents being like, I'm really tired of parents like coming to like teachers or really coming to society and being like, now I have to explain gay people. You're gonna make me explain gay people to my kids. I can't explain that. I don't even understand it. And I can't help but be like, that's a fucking skill issue, man. I can't help you. If you're a dumb fuck and you can't explain the birds and the bees and the gays and the transes to your kids, then I don't know, fucking hire an educator or just shut the fuck up and let the actual educators do their job. But I'm so sick. I'm so fucking sick. I'm sorry. Of parents who are like, I don't know how to like parent and I don't know how to educate my kids, so I think my kids should just not be educated. Like, or like complain that it's like, like why, like now I have to. They told them that the gays were all right. Now I have to figure out a way to tell them. Like, how about you shut the fuck up? How about that? How about you either make a better argument or shut the fuck up instead of complaining that everybody else is educating your child when you have a lack of ability to do so.
Teacher, it's their parents.
I like the idea of the collaboration, and obviously parents' voices belong at that table. I also like the emphasis on students having a say in this, and also other people adults that aren't parents.
This person
I'm invested
is
in that
such
too,
public
even
school.
though I don't have children of my own.
Such
and,
a
and I hear
public
what you're
school
saying
teacher.
about having to, like,
They're
parenting
like,
to confront or address, I guess,
they're
what kids are learning
team
at school.
PTA
But
meetings.
giving kids the exposure to other ideas or other things that they wouldn't be exposed to otherwise is, I think, part of what's going to help raise the next generation of people that are able to look outside their own lived experience.
But I think that oftentimes
I didn't do that.
different ideas
That was them
are
fucking around with their
presented in the classroom
cameras.
as a student as the only idea. When you're being taught that, oh, there's this many genders or anything like this, where you haven't been exposed to that in your own household, it's being presented as like the end all be all when it actually isn't. It's about educating and not indoctrinating.
God damn, Vice, get a hold of your fucking camera situation. Also, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, gender, like the gender stuff is like any parent can disagree and be like, I don't think there are more than two genders, but they're just factually incorrect. Mainly because there can be an unlimited amount of genders. They're creations of society.
As long as that is presented as a counterpoint to, well, there's people who believe this, but there's also people who believe this, that's okay. The reality of it is that in most classrooms across the country, that isn't what's happening.
And to piggyback off of that, one side is labeled as a bigot, white supremacist, homophobic. There's a lot of parents in America that are Christian or, you know, they believe in two genders.
You're right. We should just call them Christians instead of all those things.
If you say that as a teacher, especially, you could be labeled as homophobic. So there isn't this unbiased classroom because there's one side that can't really.
You say the gays don't exist, then
loud
that's
as the other side without
homophobic.
risk of losing our jobs.
But you two are kind of the ones that brought in the conflict of like there is an indoctrination going on, and only one side it has this opinion, and this side is not allowed to talk, and we have to be quiet. When really you guys are actually the loudest in regards to this issue thus far, right?
Right now, yes.
So,
in this room,
I wouldn't necessarily say that.
God damn. God damn.
I do want want to push
I love
away.
this person's
it's possible,
fit.
and I would
I
love
love
for you to hear
their
this, right?
approach.
It's the idea of someone
great.
sees me and they go, oh, you're one of those that teach that there's 72 different types of gender. Desmond Fambrini, he, him, gender fluid, bisexual. My students do not know this because it doesn't come up because I'm a learning specialist and it's my job to educate and teach a curriculum, right? Now, if I'm asked directly by a parent or if there's confusion, oh, why do you wear makeup? Same reason why girls do, because it's fun for me. It doesn't need to be this very controversial, I'm gonna mess with this child's upbringing, they're gonna go home and they're gonna turn into a gender fluid, they're gonna do 72 genders.
I think that's a question you say you should go ask your parents about how they feel about that.
Well, so,
And
okay.
Teachers are supposed to teach reading, math, science.
No, that's not, no, you dumb fuck, you dipshit, you fucking tadpole. That's not what teachers do. Teachers do not simply, like, holy shit. If you've ever been in a classroom where a teacher only read you the fucking textbook and like on slides, that's not an educator. That's a fucking stenographer. Those are bad teachers. You do not want teachers. Like, I remember in my civics class, we had this teacher, his name was Mr. Green. Dude was fucking nap time incarnate. Absolutely no personality. He would just, like, there weren't posters up in there wasn't a poster up in his entire room. There wasn't paint on the walls. There wasn't a map. The only thing in his entire room was like a fucking like it was like a little like a Constitution poster. Like, that was it. He had a Constitution and like a Bill of Rights posters that were like up in the back, and that was it. His whole entire class was him getting up and just reading the textbook. We learned nothing because we all fell the fuck asleep. Educators, teachers engage with their students on any given topic in like a million different ways, using like not just like direct examples, but indirect examples, and finding ways to relate any of the historical topics to their like classmates. Curriculum like dictates that you need to have, like, you know, if you're learning about like Martin Luther King Jr., you don't just go and fucking read the textbook article on fucking MLK. You don't just pull up the Wikipedia article and read that dry as shit. No, you present it in a way that kids can learn and understand and be usually mildly entertained, because that's how they lock it into their brain. Like, this whole thing where it's like teachers are only meant to like teach the like raw facts. It's like, no, you can just give kids textbooks for that. In that case, you don't need educators. Educators are not fucking like stenographers. They're not just fucking reading exactly what the textbook says. What they're doing is relating that information. That's the actual job of an educator. Like, oh, this dude has no understanding of how to be a teacher. Like, what am I supposed to do? I worked at a fucking like sports summer camp for a couple years, right? What am I supposed to do? Just fucking stand there when it's time to kick a ball, and I just go, move your leg from this point to this point, and then you've kicked. No, you play games, you relate it, you practice with them, you like try to get them to understand if they're having trouble. Like, you know, if it's like a soccer ball, it's like, okay, you don't kick it just with your toes. You want to kick it with the inside of your foot. You want to do sweeping drills. You want to do any of the rest of this. It's just fucking stupid. It's fucking stupid. This person doesn't understand education, but they're just like, oh my God, like the teachers are indoctrinating the kids, even though they already get indoctrinated by whatever the society has already decided is acceptable behavior. Like, yeah, no shit.
Actually going to make them contributing members of society. Answering a child's questions about whether or not men or women should be wearing makeup or not is, I don't think, within that realm.
Okay, so you said science, right? So we're talking about a physical science, we're talking about human anatomy and biology here. So a child says, I thought boys could not wear makeup. I have an X and Y chromosome and I'm wearing makeup. I could factually answer that without indoctrinating with any opinion.
But it's in no way scientific, your answer to that question.
How is that not scientific?
I would say maybe cultural, or it's a perception or an opinion. But it's in no way scientific.
Anyone else? I am a chatty person, so I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to let's see if anyone else has something
It's not scientific that you just proved that a male can wear makeup, because logically, if a male ever wears makeup, it means that, like, Jesus, I'm glad they said it.
I just have one question for you, because not all homes are welcoming or open or conversation or safe. So how do we balance that?
I think that what we're saying is that there's certain conversations that are not to be had with a teacher. And I think that the argument that a lot of people on the right and conservatives are making is that we just don't feel as if actors of the state should be having conversations that are taxpayer-funded conversations with children about conversations that have not come up in their own households. And to that point, if you can't talk about God in the classroom, why can we talk about every gender under the sun, right? I think that's the conundrum that we find ourselves in. If we are banning those conversations, we banned those a long time ago, then how can we have these conversations just because they're...
Is he trying to equivocate between like, hey, there's people who might be gay, non-binary, or trans, to fucking religion? These two things are completely different. One of them is a gender identity, another is like a sexual orientation, like, and then there's believing in Jesus, which I don't know, we like explicitly have that in the Constitution. Like, just in general, a separation of church and state is already there, written into our societal doctrines. So just on the basis of like our foundations of the United States, we already accounted for religion in the classroom and already decided, nah, we don't want any part of that shit. But like gender ideology or even like sexual orientation, none of these things are beliefs. These things are like facts. These things are identities. These things are inherent traits. Like these aren't the same thing. Nobody is born a Christian, because you're not born with like, you have to get taught who Jesus is. If it was the case that you were born a Christian, born a Catholic, born anything, you would come out and you'd already be mouthing off about Jesus. But you don't, do you? Because you have to be taught all of that stuff. You have to be told that, like, why does this happen? Oh, because Jesus says it. Like, anyway, Jesus Christ.
Belong to a different side of the political class.
So I think we actually talk about God in the classroom all the time, right?
Yeah.
Who's taught religion? Who's taught world religions? Who's taught like history in the way that, you know, Puritans, like, and that's okay, because God is part of the fabric of history and whatever else.
Also, that's theology.
This is how Christianity originated. This is how Islam originated. We don't talk about like, this is what this gender is, and this is if you feel this way, then there's gender affirmation therapy, all those things.
I think you actually bring up a really good parallel of like, I feel comfortable and I feel like it is okay to talk about identity issues the same way we talk about God. Not indoctrinating anyone, not telling this is what you have to be or you have to believe, but saying this is something that some people believe.
But in the sense of gender identity, I don't...
We already teach theology. Like, in schools, you can already, like, they will teach you, like, when X or Y religion cropped up and what the general beliefs are. The same way, like, in schools, you can talk about, like, oh yeah, there's man, there's woman, there's boys, there's girls, and then there's people who are non-binary. They're just kind of neither. They don't really identify strongly with one side or the other. There's like gay people who are into people of the same, you know, guys, you know, girls are into girls, boys are into boys, like that sort of thing. Like it's not, none of this is like, yeah, these are all factual things. What he wants taught is like doctrine. He wants he wants like religious beliefs taught. Like Jesus created, like, you know, he clay morphed all of us or whatever. I guess that's God. God clay morphed all of us at the beginning of time. That's what he wants. Which is like, no. That's not what we're teaching. That's what you're talking about is like doctrine. You're actually saying religion. What they're teaching is theology.
See that parallel. How is that making someone more literate, more successful?
What I hear you saying is that learning about different gender identities does not make somebody a more considerate, well-rounded person, but learning about different religions does make you a more considerate, well-rounded.
I'm saying that is a part of history. I don't understand where gender identity falls within.
We already teach theology, you
religious
dipshit.
History and God comes into play in terms of history, cool. But don't gay people and trans people too? It's not like I'm the first transgender person to ever walk this earth. Like there are trans people that were, and gay people who were part of major movements in this country, like from the civil rights movement to the feminist movement to, I mean, obviously Stonewall. Like, isn't that part of history too?
Let's just take a step back. So just show of hands.
No, let him answer. Oh, I hate when they do this. They fucking like they push them back to the edge, and they're like, all right, now figure it. Now you need to hit the Uno reverse card and hit me with that conservative fucking parry into strong heavy overhead. But no, they always fucking do this. They're always like, the conservative always gets back to the edge of the mountain, and then they're like, okay, now let's stop. And it's like, no, let him fucking answer. Let him fucking answer.
Who here thinks public school is the best option for kids? Okay. And who thinks private school is the best option for kids? who thinks homeschool is the best option for kids? And then some of you guys didn't raise your hands at all.
It's so challenging to pick one right answer for that, because essentially what you're asking is, who do you trust the most with your children? Who do you trust to give them the cultural values that I have, and then fill in the gaps where I don't necessarily know the answer, but I trust that they're experts and are going to give my children the attention that they need in order to develop so that they can be a better version of themselves.
If I had to choose one, it's public school. It is the best tool we have to give everybody a chance at a good education, no matter where you come from, how much money you have. Public schools, where not everybody thinks the same and people are coming from all walks of life, is a good microcosm of that global experience, where you can learn critical thinking skills and learn how to be a good community member, because not everybody looks like you or thinks like you.
Also, I would argue that public schools are going to give you, she makes a great point that I didn't even think of. Like, if you're going to a public school, you're most likely going to have a closer to one-to-one experience of the United States, of this society, coming out of a public school than you will coming out of a private school. A lot of private schools, mostly you're going to be interacting and surrounded by a lot of people who probably share your class, but also share kind of your cultural and some of your more cultural biases. Whereas if you're going to public school, you're gonna get I went to a public school. We had rich kids, we had poor kids, we had middle class kids, we had upper middle class. We had basically the full spectrum of class divisions in terms of our student base, along with a really wide and varied cultural set. We had a big Hispanic community, a lot of African Americans, white kids from the burbs, white kids from the poor areas. We had a really, really diverse mix of kids. And that's going to prepare you a lot more going out into the world than if you're going to a private school that maybe there's a few people of color and everyone's pretty well off. You don't really get that experience of going over to a friend's house and maybe they're wildly more rich than you, and you see all of that and you contextualize wow, their house is way bigger, but they do things kind of different. And I'm sure it'd be nice having this money, but I like my, middle class family. Or even if you go over to somebody who's poorer than you, maybe it gives you an appreciation for kind of where they come from in the world or how hard your family works or whatever. But you can get a lot out of those experiences. But I feel like you don't get that as much in private schools because people are self-selecting into those spaces.
You're shaking your head.
Well, first of all, our schools are more segregated ever than our public schools, especially in blue states. New York and California have the most segregated schools. And on top of that, we are in a place where our public schools are not safe, especially the last 20 years. And I just don't see why sending our kids to these environments where it's unsafe. We also used to be, because I used to be on the left, we used to be against the institutionalization of our children. These kids are being institutionalized. Having these places where there's 2,000, 3,000 kids. I'm okay with public school, but the problem with it is that it's become an environment where it's just almost like the school to prison pipeline. We used to talk about that in the 90s. We're not talking about that anymore. And I think that's something that parents need to wake up about and America needs to wake up about, the institutionalization of our children.
I talk about school to prison pipeline all day, every day. And I hear what you're saying, that it's terrible that there are parents who are sending their kids to schools that are not safe. However, what about the parents that don't have a choice? I'm thinking about the most marginalized community when I said public schools here, because I agree with you, the public schools have a lot of work to do to become the safe places where our kids are not.
Also, when it comes down to it, she's talking about this from a public school perspective. Public schools are private schools. Private schools are privately funded by fucking donors, by rich people. They're going to be safer because again, the what's the word? The largest, the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? What am I thinking? Not identifier. I can't think of the term. But the thing, okay, so my point being is that the identifier that basically that can predict your propensity to crime, to violence, any of this stuff, is going to be poverty. Meaning if you live in poverty, you're at a much higher risk of committing crimes, violence, any of that stuff. Just simply being that you're so on the edge of resources that that desperation is going to push you towards more extreme actions, which like is kind of obvious. Like, yeah, that makes sense. So if you fill schools with people who are coming from a much lower socioeconomic class, it only makes sense that you're going to see more dangerous schools, because you've housed it with people in more desperate situations, which at the end of the day comes down to how we fund schools, which a part of it unfortunately becomes like, schools are all funded by housing taxes, which if your houses aren't worth very much, or if you don't even have a lot of homeowners in your area, your school's not going to get a lot of funding. There's not a lot of money that's going to go into it. Not a lot of money to pay the teachers, not a lot of money to pay for resources, not a lot of money to build the infrastructure. Like, you're not going to, and as those resources degrade, the opinion and the view of them are obviously going to degrade. And if you're in a neighborhood, if your school's in a neighborhood where, again, there's a lot of crime, there's a lot of people in desperate situations, they're not going to have any, they're not going to have any respect for any of the stuff that you've built that's hardly holding on. They understand that, oh, we have a shitty school because nobody gives a fuck because we don't get money for our school, so the education obviously isn't that important. I'm better off staying in the streets, selling drugs, and like trying to make money than waste my time going to school, getting an education, working some shitty job that isn't even going to pay me very well. Like, at the end of the day, there's a lot of varied reasons as to why these schools are like kind of the way they are. But none of those come down to, I think, like the school being public. It comes down to how we organize the public funds for these schools.
Not in institutions where they're ignored or not giving the services they need. And also, for the people that don't have a choice and that is the only option their kids have, I just believe that's worth fighting for. That's why I said
absolutely. I'm a big advocate for school choice.
Well, why don't we just show hands? Who believes in school choice?
Can you specify like what you mean by
that's where parents can apply the money that they pay to taxes. They get vouchers and they can put that into any school that they want. It's very popular in red states right now, and a lot of blue states are against it, especially teachers unions are against it because it's taking money away from the public schools and creating more of a competitive market.
Right. That's why I wouldn't raise my hand. Yeah.
Sometimes with school choice, it gets a little bit tricky, right? My first class the first day I had 25 students. By day 2, I had 19 because 6 parents switched out of the class because they saw me and they were like, there's no freaking way, before I even got a word in.
As a parent, I would want to know, like, do you not?
Also keep in mind, if we went to a system where so understand, like, the school choice voucher system, the reason why most leftists, and I'll explain my big opposition to it, is simply that, like, you are funneling money out of a public system that is beholden to you. If you live in a neighborhood, you send your kid to a public school, your money goes to that public school has a responsibility to respond to your interests and to deliver a good education to your child, right? What the school voucher system in these private and like charter schools tend to do is obviously, you trade the money that you would send to taxes that now doesn't go to that school, meaning the school that your kid previously went to, the public school, now doesn't have money going towards it, meaning whoever's left in that school now has less resources going towards their education, which, that's one bad thing. The people who are left outside of the system are kind of fucked. But now your money is going to a private institution. Now, the difference between private institutions and public ones is that private institutions have one goal in mind, and that is to turn a profit, meaning that it might be the case that for the first, year, we'll say, let's go with this. There's 4 years of high school. Your freshman year and your sophomore year, your parents decide to pull you out of public school. They get a voucher. They send you to a private school, right? Your first 2 years, all of their tax dollars, that they would have, that gets allocated to the school, buys them their vouchers. But what happens when when junior year and senior year roll around? What happens when tuition, just like college tuition, starts to go up? What do you do now? Now, the money that you pay out of taxes isn't enough to buy you your full voucher. Now, parents are paying tuition on top of this voucher for your junior year. Maybe it goes up next for your senior year. Maybe there's another charter school that moves into the area, and now you have two of them. But with both of them competing against each other, you have, maybe you have your old, the public school that's still always going to be there, but the money you now have has to go to one of those two. And now it's like, the tuition might be higher at this one, it might be lower at that one, but is the quality of your education getting any better? So we already see this kind of with colleges, and there's a lot of colleges and they kind of compete for students, but they also select for certain kinds of students. But something that they also do with a lot of the funds is they won't put it into educational resources. They'll put it into their football team, their basketball team, their stadium, their whatever. So the worry I have is you're going to end up seeing, as these charter schools become more prevalent, as they push the public school basically out of existence, they've now raised the bar. They've now created basically a paywall that you have to pay to get into school at all. That is going to be above the tax dollars you would have ever put in. You could look at a situation where there are two charter schools and one public school in your local town, and both private schools are going to cost you all of the money that you would have spent to send your kid to public school, plus extra for tuition for each of those, which maybe they compete with each other, or if they're in a situation where they have too much control of that market, you have no choice. You either pull your kid out and they go to public school, which is dog shit education now because there's almost no money going towards it, or B, you now have to pay whichever one of them is charging you just a little bit less. But no matter what, it's always going to go up because they always want to increase profits. Their goal is not to deliver an education to your child, but instead to turn a profit on educating your child. That's the big difference, and that's the thing that I worry about.
Think that is okay, or they're right to withdraw when they see you, because ultimately you're probably an excellent educator.
I appreciate that.
I have no doubt about that, but I think we get into muddy waters when we start trying to take that choice away from the parent.
Do I think that it is okay for a parent to see me and go, not around my kid? No, I don't think that's okay. I feel like that's really crossing the line because you are, for lack of better words, discriminating.
You also
against
can't
me
choose
openly.
this.
That's like seeing a black teacher and being like, there's no way. It is the same. It is the same.
It's still the right of the parent to make that decision as to whether or not they want their child to learn from you.
Okay.
It's still that parent's right. You can disagree with their motivations, their motives, their ideas.
So here's the question. No matter what, taxpayer dollars are going to go into this. What societal benefit do we get from people not exposing their kids to other races, to people of other sexual preferences? Is there a societal incentive to having kids be basically educated outside of the existence of gay or black people? Or if you have a parent that doesn't like black people, doesn't like gay people, right? If you have a parent who's like, oh, I don't want my kid being taught by the gays or the blacks, right? Do we, because again, it's still your tax dollars. Just because it's going to a private institution, it's still the tax dollars you're paying. Is it societally beneficial to reinforce that parent's bigotry? I'd love to hear the argument for pro-bigotry.
Would you say
because you can't avoid
this started around school
gay or
starts.
black
Even
people
if you want to decide on a different learning environment for your
in the
kid,
rest of the
there
world.
are people that do not have the option to send their child to a different place.
They can't go to a cashier and be like, no, I want a white guy to ring me up. That's not a thing that can happen. So it's not preparing them. That's not preparing them. So should a parent have the ability to deny their child preparation to enter into society? Is that, again, a societal interest that we have? I don't think so.
Bar should not be so low. And that's my concern with school choice, is that sometimes people think that if everyone flees to the suburbs, who is teaching in these schools where everyone has decided they don't want the tax dollars going to? And that's one of the big concerns with funding of education being the way that it's set up. It essentially makes it so that the people that are stuck with these as their options don't end up with as good a school. And everyone deserves to have their kid go to a good school.
Well, if there's school choice, they won't be stuck with those options. They can have other options. That's the whole point of that. Also, it is the school district's job to appropriately use those budgets. Most of the budget in the schools aren't going to the teachers. We got cafeteria workers, janitors, all of these people that are getting paid.
It used to be 9 out of 10 people that were employees of schools and districts were teachers. Now it's 50-50.
Yes.
So there is some mismanagement of funds in this country. We actually fund our kids really well.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Too many administrators.
Just to go back a little bit to like when you guys are raising your hands about the different choices.
Too many administrators. Do you think that's the case in the private sector? Have you ever worked in the private sector? Do you think that there's a lot of admin in the private sector? An overabundance of middle managers, people who just, you know, they just oversee a bunch of random shit but don't actually contribute any value to any like institution or corporation? How often do we see this? All the fucking time. Like, all the fucking time. If you think that a private school that's there to make money, like we see this in, again, colleges. Colleges are private institutions, and they constantly misuse their funds because the way that they want to drive value for their universities is not through educational resources. It's through bells and whistles. It's through stadiums. It's through football teams, basketball teams, new wings of whatever the fuck. This is the privatization of education. It becomes less about the education and more about like impressing parents to get them to pay more money.
You raised your hand for homeschooling. Can you talk us through like why do you think homeschooling is the best option?
Well, if we look at the history of this country, a lot of people were homeschooled. A lot of our founders were homeschooled. Like they only went to school till 3rd grade, a lot of them. And I think what has happened is parents have decided that the government is going to do a better job at raising their children than themselves. We have also come to a place where school is taking up the majority of our day. And we have this mistrust of parents that they can't educate their own children. And I think that that's wrong. I think that a lot of parents, and if you look at homeschool data, like my friend Phil right here, he's got 7 kids and he's homeschooling them all. And actually homeschool kids are turning out really well.
I think you bring up a lot of very valid points, but I have to say, and I just want your opinion on this, I would never homeschool my own kids. And I want my kids to be smarter than me, than I ever was. How am I going to have a child that is smarter and does better than I do if I'm their only teacher?
You grow alongside your child.
Okay.
I think as a teacher, I feel like I've learned the most in my life as a teacher, like more so than in college. And
also, not that homeschooling's like bad, immoral, or like I don't have as strong opinions on homeschooling as I do in terms of private school, but like when it comes down to it, I can't help but wonder, like when it comes to private school kids, I always just, like, my observation always becomes that they're socially stunted. They like don't know how to relate to the rest of the world as well because they just haven't been exposed to it. They've been exposed to their household, but like not every household is their household. Not every person is their it's just very insular. Not again, I don't have as big of opinions, as strong of opinions, but yeah, that would be my fear for homeschooling kids.
So parents becoming teachers actually good for them as well.
And even in the public schools, a lot of teachers are relying on the lesson plans. Speaking from experience, I got into credit where my wife does the homeschooling, and I've watched that process of her learning alongside, to make sure when they ask these questions, I'm getting knowledge on the material as well, so I can help you get through it. Nothing replaces that value, that bonding time that she gets to have with the kids.
I taught high school for 6 years, and I quit, and I'm a stay-at-home mom with my own kids. So we're a one-income family. We're lucky enough to be able to live off of my husband's salary. Would you say that most homeschool families have one parent working?
I do think the statistics show that is the case.
It's like the only way to do it well.
Pretty much. And, another misconception, though, is that they think it's a matter of income, and homeschool families have to be rich and et cetera. And I think the average homeschool family makes like $65K. So the reality is they're scaling back and making sacrifices for this lifestyle because they value what is coming out of it.
So let's just say that for the people that homeschool isn't an option, what is for so many people it's not, I do not think that school choice is the way to go about that, which I know is a lot of people's answer to that.
That's also the thing. Like, we don't live in a one-income country. We live in for the most part, we live in a 2-income country. So, like, homeschooling just isn't, you can do it, but it's not a solution for educating our entire population.
Can we just get Sean in here? What are your thoughts on this?
School choice gives people an exit ramp. You get to send your kid to a school that best fits what you think is best for their development. At the end of the day, it's kitchen table conversations about we've worked hard to raise a family. We want to spend our money in a way that best fits our child, best fits our family. And when you don't have school choice, you do make those trade-offs. There are real consequences there.
The school is considered one of those shared spaces, one of those last kind of shared spaces where you might bump into someone who maybe comes from a different background than you, has a different ideology than you.
Okay.
What do you lose if you homeschool and then you're not putting yourself in these kind of situations?
What you lose is negative influences. One of the biggest things I think when it comes to homeschool is keeping my kids away from your bad kids. We've went and taken our children to pride parades. And you know what I mean? We've been there, we've been loving, and we showed support to the people there. But at the same time, we explain our views on the matter that we believe marriage is between a man and a woman. And from experience and talking to people, I understand that a lot of people who choose that lifestyle, it is based on trauma. A lot of were molested or sexually assaulted as children. So I don't think it's okay for...
Which is not true. Like, when it comes down to it, like, he can, like, so this is the thing is he's like, you know, we go to pride parades, we understand, but it's like, you've just demonstrated that you don't. You have, like, no understanding of what you're talking about. Like, you've just demonstrated that if this is what you're teaching your kids, then you're teaching them homophobic propaganda and homophobic stereotypes. To which it's like, all right, like, again, I'm going to say it, what's the societal, you know, what's the societal incentive to you being homophobic? You know, it's...
For me to teach to my children that this is something normal we ought to accept when it doesn't progress society. We would not be able to procreate if everybody were to choose that lifestyle. So I think it's okay for me as a parent to say, hey, this exists, that exists, but this is our view on it, and this is how we want to present it to them.
Do you think it's somewhat problematic that you're going like, well, this is our viewpoint, that marriage is between a man and a woman because we can't move society forward with gay couples? Like, we've factually proven that incorrect. I can actually tell you that gay parents, on average, make exceptional parents and do exceptional things with kids because they adopt, and they only adopt kids when they are financially capable, which actually makes kids of gay parents actually more successful and academically competent. So gay parents actually are very good at moving society forward, and we have the statistics to prove
Could that be a long-term solution, though, if a large population chose to choose that lifestyle? There would be no...
Wait, but that's not how that works, though. Nobody is saying that if you can be gay, everyone will be gay. There's, like, gay people are just going to be a percentage of the population, the same way whites are, the same way blacks are, the same way Asians are. Like, being gay is not like this, well, I mean, he might think it's a contagion, I guess. But it's not an all or nothing. It's just they exist amongst the rest of us. Like, and again, this is obviously coming from somebody who isn't that educated on this stuff. And, like, you know, will defend, like, oh, I teach my kids fine. It's like, well, if this is what you're teaching them, I'm not sure if you are. Like, this is the best you could come up with. And also, like, the conservatives here, keep in mind that the idiot from earlier got on his high horse about, like, oh, indoctrination, and, like, the schools are only teaching, you know, this one angle, and they're not teaching both sides of whatever this or that opinion, right? Do you think he's teaching do you think he's teaching both sides? Or do you think he's saying, okay, so these people think it's okay to be gay. It's not. We don't think that's correct, and it's not. We, like, if these people were everyone, society would, like, die within 50 years. So, like, they're wrong, but that's what they believe. And, like, and notice, like, none of the conservatives are interested. Like, well, nobody's jumping in on the conservative side and being like, well, hey, aren't you just teaching only one side? Because they're not interested in teaching. They're interested in forwarding whatever their political ideology is. They themselves prove by their silence on this, prove that they're not interested in the ceasing of indoctrination. They just want the indoctrination to be their indoctrination. Their doctrines are the ones that they want in, you know, cemented in the minds of children. Even though, again, society gains nothing from the kind of, like, small-minded, like, not educated enough opinions of these people. They're just not equipped with the ability to even think or conceptualize any of this stuff. And they want to be able to say, well, I should have a right to like to make my kids or keep my kids ignorant. To which I can't help but be like, do you have a right to keep your kids ignorant? Is that a right that you have? What about the rights of your kids to not be maleducated? Like,
okay, so no one is choosing this lifestyle.
That's an opinion.
Okay,
It's not an opinion. It's just.
Okay, sorry.
Did you choose to be straight, sir?
I've been teaching for 15 years.
So
and
have I.
I will say that there is some kids now that are going for that community that are doing it not out of a genuine, and there's pockets of them too. Like you'll notice like friend groups of girls that will all of a sudden decide that they're now trans.
The idea of LGBTQ being trending and the idea of teaching kids that being gay is a choice, those are two very different
So I'll answer that. Yes, I chose to be straight. Absolutely.
So
can you tell us about it? So you
actually you could be attracted.
I want somebody to tell me about this. How did you come to the decision? Like because when it comes down to it, you have to ask. It's like, all right. You chose to be straight. Okay. Okay. You chose. What were the factors that made you choose women? Right? If you're a dude, why women and not men? What is it about those two things? But and it's like, okay, when did you come to this decision? It's like, oh, well, I guess I always knew that. And it's like, okay, so you didn't choose this. This wasn't an active thing. You didn't go, do I like vagina or do I like dick? I really like popsicles and lollipops. They're in like hot dogs. I really, really like cylindrically shaped food. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I want that inside. I don't know. Was this an active decision? No, it wasn't. It's just something you kind of felt after a point. It's just kind of something you either oh, titties. I love titties. They're great. Or you didn't. I don't understand this. People who are like, it was a choice. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What is this weird choice shit? I'll tell you right now, I saw boobies in some movie trailer and then went, those look like some nice boobies. And that was it. That's as much thinking as it took from me. It was a reaction. And reactions aren't choices, you idiots. Ugh.
To me if you wanted to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And let me explain. I have seen transgendered people who I thought were born female that were very attractive. I didn't know. Now, once I find out that that's not what you are, I am choosing not to pursue that. You're
first of all, there's a lot of societal stigmas that are driving you towards that. But yeah, that's a pretty society tells you that that's weird. So you think it's weird. But you were still you didn't choose to be attracted to a hot ass trans woman. You didn't choose to be attracted to that person. You saw gendered identifiers and sexual secondary traits that all aligned with things that you preferred. Nobody nobody chooses ass or titties. Somebody asks you and you have to, and the answer you're gonna give, and then you try to post hoc justify which one you prefer. Every straight guy out there, this to be true.
So yes, you can be attracted to someone that is of another gender.
Let's talk about what do you think should be taught about gender identity in school? What do you think is being taught?
I want to go back to something you were saying earlier that's related to this about you're seeing trends, and I am too, right? Last semester, when I was teaching, I had a trans kid in every classroom, and I was like, whoa, when I started teaching,
there was one in school.
There was none, right? And I'm like, this is, wow.
And they were really for it, too. They went for it.
And I'm hearing you that is something I'm seeing, too, in the classrooms. Fair, okay. Now, I'm not going to presume to be in the heads of those kids and to understand, what's real for them or whatever, but I will tell you this. Historically speaking, a disproportionate number of kids who are gay, who are trans, who are any of the LGBTQI, fill in the letters, right? Didn't live to see adulthood. Maybe that's why we don't have an older generation of trans adults, because
I attended a funeral of a trans student last month.
A lot of them didn't make it. And so when I hear about kids feeling comfortable enough to try expressing something where maybe they wouldn't be able to do in other spaces. And I understand that maybe that's not what you want for.
Also, and I'm gonna say, what's the harm? If there's like she mentions, oh, there's a group of girls who thinks they're trans. It's cool. Let them do that then. Some of them it'll be genuine. Some of them it'll be a trend. like anything else, like music, like makeup, like anything, any of these things. Somebody in that group is genuine about their like interest in that identity, in that the honesty of that identity. Maybe not all of them, but that's okay if all of them like, you know, participate, and it allows one person to maybe feel like what's the word, safe enough to explore that in a more open manner, and then that person ends up being trans and the others go like, oh yeah, I mean, something thought about, but you know it was more their thing, I think, you know, not so much my thing, like, you know, a little bit but not as much, but that's their thing in the friend group. Like, yeah, that's like fine, like there's no harm done to any of this
for you, your kids. But I'm thinking about the most marginalized and vulnerable people, and unfortunately, statistically, for our queer youth, disproportionately they fall in that category.
Mind you, with the whole concept of school choice, I'm all for parents who agree with what you're teaching, sending their children to you. I just think ultimately it should be within the parent to make that choice.
What do you think should be taught in sex ed?
I think it should be health education, yes. I taught middle school and high school, and they started giving it to my students in 7th grade, and I have students come back to me traumatized because I think sex ed has gone away from what it was. There are some lessons, like for example, they have a lesson where the kids in 3rd grade in the New Jersey curriculum, there's a picture of a woman's spread eagle, and they're learning all the different body parts of the clitoris sense. And the stuff. Every child is different. Some are not developmentally ready for this or mature enough for it.
I grew up with abstinence education.
That's pretty rough.
Where we didn't talk about sex ed until middle school, but mostly 10th grade and high school. But I think that middle school is far too late to be talking about sex ed. And it's not because I think that 2nd graders are, you know, wanting to be promiscuous, but like having sex ed scaffolded because it is a preventative measure against sexual assault, often being done in the home.
Just because that happens in the home doesn't mean that we need to label all parents as not capable of teaching sex to their children and giving it to teachers.
But
well, no, but you fucking idiot. You want to guarantee that all kids are getting this, so that all kids, like, it's like if we could put fucking like car resistant body armor on kids, and they're like, what, do you think all parents are bad drivers? Like, no, it's just, it'd be nice to have all kids have car protective body armor. Like, it's just kind of something we would all like to have. 0% of them have any exposure to this. So like, you know, if fucking one kid does not have sexually assaulting parents, then great, they get educated, whatever. But if like the like two desks over, you have some kid who is, you're hitting both of those. You're re-securing the kid who you know isn't having those problems, and you're addressing the one that is having those problems. Like, what is this? Like, what? Fucking idiot. What the fuck?
Teachers, for a lot of children, are the only trusted adults, and it is incredibly dangerous to remove teachers who are trained professionals to deal with these crises in the home from the situation, and that's just like a funnel for child abuse.
I think a huge thing that's missing in education in the schools when it comes to sex ed is consent.
Yes.
You know, that's not being taught at all, to my understanding. I never learned it in schools, and that creates consequences when you look at the situations that are going on here.
I think that we have such a hypersexualized society. Too. Obviously, kids are having sex younger. They're hooking up younger. It's just reality. I would rather those individuals, and also from a pro-life perspective, know how to have safe sex and preventative sex that prevents pregnancies than them to just go around willy-nilly just doing whatever they want.
So there's a lot of middle schoolers in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are getting pregnant at earlier ages, and we're starting to rank like the highest nationally in terms of middle school pregnancies. And that's because a lot of middle schoolers are, again, like you said, like getting sexually involved earlier. Whatever
it's
it
the
is,
Cardi B music.
Whatever it is, it's happening, and we need to be able to address
it. It's the Cardi B. Yes. It's always culture with these guys. They like it couldn't possibly be that we're like not educating our children on sexual education. It's that like somebody came out with a song that had some dirty words in it. Yes. Yeah. First of all, the real question is, who's letting their like fucking 2-year-old or whatever, who is letting their 2nd grader listen to Cardi B? First of all, that would be one of those things where we would say maybe be better parents and don't let your small children listen to fucking WAP. Like, maybe that's it. Maybe bad parenting. Like, at the end of the day, it's not Cardi B's fucking job to shield your child's virgin ears. It's the parents. If you're incapable of doing that, then like, I don't know, fucking get good, loser. Fucking get good, sweaty. Fuck.
it, and students need to be able to be equipped with the skills to understand how to have safe sex. If parents aren't having those conversations at home and middle schoolers are getting pregnant anyways, like why can we not include that in the school so they have some form of information?
Again, it just goes back to the fact that so many of this issue is just not black and white. It really is 50 Shades of Grey, because like there is just no one size fits all.
50 Shades of Grey. Whoa,
what age do you think sex ed should be taught in schools? Like starting at what age?
Probably at some point during secondary school, because if we're talking about it scientifically, kids need to understand that science is a body of knowledge that we're building together. This is what we currently understand about human anatomy.
As far as like actually getting into intercourse and the details of all of that, in my experience, I usually at least start giving that understanding around 7, 8 years old.
I think that sex ed is a lifelong discussion.
7, 8 years old. That's actually pretty early. I would agree with that, absolutely. Your kids should probably be at least like aware of, like, because sexual education for like 2nd and 3rd graders is not like what's the word? Usually it's going to be implemented from like a very clinical and like uninteresting way, because you want kids from that age forward to be able to identify sexual assault and identify what is and is not okay behavior by adults.
And it starts, I mean, as soon as you can communicate. Now, that doesn't mean that you are giving a high schooler's curriculum to a 3-year-old, but I'm already talking about consent and using proper anatomical language with my children. And that's where it begins and it ends in adulthood.
I think as long as it happens in a way such that, to the point you were making, that like kids are being protected, that's what I would say we prioritize.
I would say go back to the way it was when I was in elementary school. They separated the boys and the girls, and the girls watched a video about their period and all these things. The guys watched another video. Yeah, it was health class. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't talk about sex education, the actual contraception, all of those things until high school.
I think we need to separate health.
So the way it is now, basically, I don't know if they split the kids up. Honestly, I don't think you need to split kids up, if I'm being perfectly honest. There's really no reason to. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. Like, what do you need to split the kids up for? I mean, we're all adults here. It doesn't matter. Even if you split them up, show them the videos separately, you bring them all back in, and all they do is snicker at each other and make little like jokes. Like you're not avoiding anything in this process.
Education from sex education. Health education should be lifelong. No sex ed for now, the way it's being taught in a lot of these states.
Let's talk a little bit about other things that fall under the responsibility of what teachers do in the classroom. What is CRT?
Critical race theory in reality is this complex legal institution that relates race to all of the institutions of America since its founding and since its birth. And it's something that I've never learned about in my classroom. I don't have any friends that have learned about it in their classrooms. It's something that's often taught on the graduate level or the undergraduate level. So I think that it's kind of not a great term to use in reference to conversations surrounding K-12 education, because it's not actually something that's even on like the docket for consideration.
That was a perfect description. I could not have done a better description if I tried.
It is in our schools. I saw the lessons that contain critical race theory in California.
It said the words critical race.
It said the words critical race theory.
And she's not wrong. She's not wrong, because some states have implemented CRT into their curriculum. It means different things for different districts. So this is about to be a very complicated conversation.
So in my district, and this isn't...
This person's great. I love this person.
California,
I wish they were my teacher.
They're requiring a class called ethnic studies in order to graduate. And in the class, they were taught about critical race theory. They were taught the definition. They were taught to analyze school policy through critical race theory. And they were taught how critical race theory is beneficial to analyze the U.S. It's basically like this idea that every institution in America, every institution, that interaction that you have has some sort of element of race, and usually there's a hierarchy of oppressed versus oppressor. And there are kids in America in K through 12 that are being taught that, and I'm so tired of people saying that's not happening when it is. And then when I expose it, I'm being called racial slurs and names for exposing it. And I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah, there's like kids in America, which again is some states, and not all of them, as that other person put, not all of them are teaching the exact same thing. Also, at the end of the day, critical race theory is like fine. It's really just a way of identifying systems for the most part. Like, I think I talked about this with Gaines at some point, but like, yeah, it's like the thing with critical race theory is, honest to God, the problem with critical race theory is that it's been painted as like this, like, oh, it creates like an oppressor class. It's like, well, not really. So like the idea is being able to identify basically groups of that hold like power in a society, and kind of the way that their influence is continually reinforced by the systems and structures that were built by that powerful group. That's really most of it. People make it into like an anti-white, or like it's none of these things. It's just a way of understanding the way in which the systems, the many systems of not just capitalism, but like political structures and societal structures bear down depending on people's race and like kind of how those things intersect.
So I think we need to stop saying it's not being taught in America and change it to should it be taught in America, because it is. It is. There are teachers that are teaching
It should.
So there's a recent bill that was passed in Texas called Senate Bill 3, and it completely revamped Texas's curriculum standards and basically eliminated all requirements for teaching of history education in Texas that relate to diverse perspectives. So teachers can go through the entirety of K through 12 education without ever talking about slavery as an institution, even though it's thoroughly ingrained into just the history, just the basic facts of America's history.
My understanding, I don't see the banning of slavery being taught in
It's
Texas.
not the banning.
Yeah.
The issue is that it's no
'Cause
longer.
I know that bill.
It's no longer required.
I know
and
that bill, and I know it also states that you're not supposed to teach it in a way that causes mental anguish.
So it does not ban it.
Yeah, and like what's mental anguish? Like there's a reason why they put terms like mental anguish in there, and it's because it's something that you can't actually measure. It's not something real. It's just something that like that politicians and like right-wing operatives use as a like basically a catch-all term for like for whenever they like don't agree politically, they'll just be like, I have such mental anguish how you'd bring up slavery. Are you saying white people are bad? And it's like, well, no, but we need to teach slavery, and white people were the ones who owned slaves in this country. Slaves were 3/5 of a person, so we kind of have to teach that. But, you know, again, the like critical race theory, if you're looking at like the 3/5 compromise, would identify the very obvious relationship between citizenship and basically state voting power or state representative power, since that's where the compromise comes from.
It doesn't ban the talking of the institution of slavery, but it does create a loophole for teachers to never touch on the topic at any point in a child's education. And that is something that is happening. And it's something that is happening to peers.
Yeah, and you don't think there's going to be teachers who
in communities outside of, I guess, my home
interested
city of
in
Dallas,
that?
but having traveled and having talked to students across the state of Texas, I can confidently say that there are teachers who are not teaching very key facts of American history because critical race theory conversations have so clouded the teaching of history as an entire whole.
And it's not often called CRT anymore. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's called all these different names and labels because of how divisive of a thing that it is. And I think at the end of the day, the big thing here is that let's teach Black history. No one on the right is saying, do not teach Black history.
Did you notice how, like, nobody really talks about CRT anymore either? Like, the midterms happened and CRT, like, went from being, like, this thing that everyone should be concerned with to we never talk about it. Let me see if I can find like a chart.
History, do not teach slavery. If we forget those lessons of the past, we're bound to repeat them. But what we're also saying is that stop being vindictive towards white people for being white. No one alive today was a slave, and no one alive today owned slaves. And so for white children to sit in a classroom and be blamed for sins that they themselves did not commit is wrong. For Black people, for Black children to sit in a classroom and be told that because of the color of your skin, well, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're really not going to go that far because the society hates you, and then you have all these structural barriers preventing your success. That is also wrong. That is not lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity, and I think that is what schools should be about.
Wait, I thought we were supposed to be just teaching facts. I thought we were supposed to just be teaching facts and nothing else. Okay, so I found it. Okay, so. All right, critical race theory. Let's see. March 2022. Look at this huge spike. Whoa, look at this. And then disinterest. Actually, where's no, don't give me past 4 hours. What am I thinking? No, not wait, what chart is this for? 12 months? No, can I get more than 12 months? Is that a thing I can do? 7 days, 30 days, 90 days? 90 days? No. 90 days would not do me that. 5 years? No, that's probably too much. Oh, okay. Well, actually, we can kind of look at this. Let's see. Because what? The election was in November. So we got a big spike in September. Let's see. What is this? This is like June of 21. October. And now it's back down to all like this never was an issue until, whoa, suddenly it became something interesting to talk about. Presidential election this year, time to turn on the fucking CRT machine. Fucking let's see, what's the note? An improvement to our data collection system was applied. I don't care. And let's see, 2020. I want to see 2022. Let's see. Like, nobody's really interested in it in 2022. Nope. Yep. Yeah. Like, you can kind of see how this was only really interesting for the 2020 election. And then it was like, oh, okay, this really didn't do all that much for us. Anyway.
You can't create the next generation of leaders if they are never capable of seeing themselves as leaders, right? And I think like that.
Oh yeah. Also, let me go back and let me go back and hear the rest of the dumb shit.
That is not lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity. And I think that is what schools should be about. You can't create the next generation of leaders if they are never capable of seeing themselves as leaders, right? And I think like that's not going to go that.
Do they have like a back 15-second thing?
Critical race theory conversations have so clouded the teaching of history as an entire whole.
And it's not often called CRT anymore. It's called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's called all these different names and labels because of how divisive of a thing that it is.
Diversity, inclusion, and equity and inclusion are different. Those are different.
It is, and I think at the end of the day, the big thing here is that
those
let's teach
things
Black
you
history.
implement.
No one on the right is saying do not teach Black history, do not teach slavery. If we forget the
right, they're just creating loopholes for people to not do that thing. It's like it's rather obvious. It's like, yeah, you don't explicitly say don't teach this thing. You just leave the door open for people to not teach that thing, and then when they do it, then you go, whoa. And I guess they just determined it wasn't useful information for students.
Those lessons of the past, we're bound to repeat them. But what we're also saying is that stop being vindictive towards white people for being white. No one alive today was a slave, and no one alive today owned slaves. And so for white children to sit in a classroom and be blamed for sins that they themselves did not commit is wrong. For Black people, for Black children to sit in a...
I don't know what schools these people went to, but like we never learned that like white people like nobody stopped the presentation when we were doing slavery, when we were doing the Civil War and slavery. Nobody was like, okay, now we need to stop. Now we need all the white kids, we need you to stay seated. All the Black kids stand up. Okay, all the white kids, you need to say I'm sorry for enslaving you as loud as you can to our 3 Black students in our class here. Like this isn't happening. Like teaching slavery, teaching the horrors of slavery is not like anti-white. You would have to be a racist to think that.
Classroom and be told that because of the color of your skin, well, it doesn't matter how hard you try, you're really not going to go that far because the society hates you, and then you have all these structural barriers preventing your success. That is also wrong. That is not lessons of hope. That is not lessons of opportunity, and I think that is what
again, I thought we were supposed to be teaching only the Pythagorean theorem
right?
and facts.
And I think like that is what CRT.
Thought we weren't supposed to be instilling
in some ways.
Thought we weren't supposed to indoctrinate our kids. We're supposed to indoctrinate them with hope. The fuck?
It does to young children of color.
What CRT means to me is obviously really different from what it means to you. And when you were saying before, like kids are being anguished, I am not for kids feeling guilty about being born in the body they were born in. That's not what I taught.
What did you teach?
I mean, what did I teach? Well, for one thing, I taught about slavery. For another thing, I taught about like the ripple effects of slavery that we're still feeling today. In no way saying that people of color are less than or can't be, or no, not the opposite. Saying like people have persevered through things that I myself as a white person will never understand.
To really make this micro, the way I see it is there is no reason that kids of a certain age, right, because it's different teaching to a 6-year-old and teaching to a 17-year-old or in college, shouldn't learn about the history of slavery, the history of redlining, the history of Italians being lynched in this country, et cetera, looking at the facts.
We don't teach that enough, honestly.
That have happened so we can learn from it. That is a totally different conversation than when you got instances like in Cupertino, California, where you have 7 and 8-year-olds who are being sat down and said, okay, time to do a privilege exercise.
That's what happened in
Let's write out, where you are on the power prism. Because that can create situations where students have warped views of themselves, especially if they're young. And I don't think it's appropriate because of the emotional impact it can have on folks.
If people are actually being sat down being like, if you're white, you're an oppressor and you're bad, that is not okay. That is not CRT. That is not critical race theory, and that is not culturally responsive teaching.
So it's not necessarily being blatantly said, but it's being implied over and over again.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So, like, they didn't say it, but I want to say that they said it. Okay. I don't like this lady. She's clearly dishonest.
There is definitely a way to teach CRT without it putting anybody down. But it's like, hey, just so y'all know, if you're interested, there's different types of racism. There's the idea of racism as you treat someone differently because they're a certain color. And yeah, you could be racist to a white person if you don't like them for being white. Now, there's also systemic racism because we took a whole bunch of slaves from another country and brought them over here. But with that said, right, there's different types of racism here. And you can expose yourself to
Keep in mind, systemic racism has like actually no interest in what the target race is. Systemic racism, most of the time, like systemic racism can be performed by any group against any group. Like you can absolutely describe any system of systemic racism like with any group. It's a universal like concept of discrimination. It just so happens that in America, if we're talking systemic racism, we're talking about systems built to favor, or at the very least to not favor black people, or more specifically poor people, which just happen to be black people on average.
At different times, but you don't have to make anyone feel bad. You just say the statistics the way they are. You're not saying one person's good, one person's bad. You just go over the definitions.
How should we be teaching race?
Well, I don't think we should be teaching white privilege in the classroom.
But teaching about race, like if you're, designing your ideal, setting.
Yeah, I think.
How do you think race should be taught?
Is that because you think it doesn't exist, or because they can't handle it, or like?
I think again, when it comes to the privilege discussion, like that's a great conversation for you to have with your child. But I don't think that taxpayer-funded.
So what are we supposed to do?
We allow in our schools.
Okay, bro. Real talk though, like brother to brother. Teaching white privilege does not inherently mean black people are less. Factually incorrect, right? So
what is white privilege?
White privilege is the idea of white people may have benefits that fall in a societal structure. Because they are white, they have advantages. Not such as, for example, if you send out a resume and you make one name a white name and the other name the classic.
What's a white name?
White name was John, for example, right?
I know black John.
Okay, no, hear me out. Let me finish, okay? We did a study. I didn't do the study, but
oh my God, this person's like, there's John's like, no, you dipshit. Holy shit. Just listen to it. Just fucking let them talk. Just shut the fuck up. Holy fuck. God damn, like
study where basically it was sent out 2 different resumes. They were the exact same, right? One was given a classic white name. The other was given the name Jamal. The white name got 2 times more callbacks.
And
right?
I disagree with what you're saying.
But the idea of white privilege, right? The idea that somebody that is white may have an advantage does not inherently mean you are teaching a black individual they cannot accomplish great things. That is completely separate. So we're talking about fake biological science and social science. We're not even in the same building at school right now.
Well, again, in regards to these like audit studies about like what is a
also keep in mind, people get really like touchy about white privilege. White privilege is not like you have it better. It just simply is describing in a shorthand way that like society is built more with your biases and your tendencies in mind. That's all that's going to mean. It doesn't mean that like it's going to target black people, but it is going to align closer. The society is going to align closer with more like what is determined to be white in the society's biases and experiences. Now, this dude, the dude right here in the front here mentioned the lynching of Italians, right? Which super accurate. We don't really teach that history much at all. But like there was a time when systemic racism would have affected black people in a negative fashion the same way it would have affected Italians in that way. This is what I mean by like systemic racism isn't interested in the actual target race. It's interested in the preferential race. It's interested in the preferential like racial identity, which doesn't really mean very much. Again, eventually Italians became part of white people, right? But it was only through like social what's the word I'm looking for? Integration to a degree, and like, amongst other factors that I can't really think of at the moment, but let's just move on. That Italians got kind of rolled into the white identity in the United States, and suddenly Italians faced a lot more preferential systemic treatment. Again, it has nothing to do with you being white. It has everything to do with you aligning with the preferential identity and its biases and tendencies.
White name. It's not necessarily that the name itself is white. It's that the perceiver, the person that is reading the resumes, for some strange reason, feels like when they see a white name that they are on their team, or that there are positive stereotypes associated with people being white. That's what we're talking about when we talk about white privilege.
Yeah, like close your eyes and picture a Jamal. What do you see? And then close your eyes and picture like, I don't know, like a Michael. And like, depending on what you like envision there, if you're hiring people, there are people who like, they don't meet both of these people. They see both of these names. They see a Michael Johnson, or I don't know, Johnson. I'm trying to think of like a really, really like, yeah, we'll just go with Johnson. Fuck it. They see like a Michael Johnson and like a a like Jamal whatever the fuck, I don't know, I'm terrible with fucking names, but like the visions of what they think in their head are going to align with certain biases, right? And like the fact that on average people lean towards certain stereotypes, have certain biases, that tells us that the system and how we've socialized people and how we've kind of identified what is professional and what is acceptable, there seems to be a bias in there. Like it's really not that. It's not about white people. Like people tend to think it's like, oh, it's about white people being better. No, it's just about favoritism. That's all it's identifying.
Because she's a black woman, even though she is Oprah. But if someone was white and goes into the same store, some people, because of their own racial stereotypes, might believe that they can afford it. And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about white privilege. It's the sort of systemic benefits that you get from society.
No, I want to add, though, what you're describing, though, is discrimination. But to call it privilege, when the reality is, let's say you take the white person who would be considered white trash, you would get the same result from them. So I don't think you can necessarily assume that that's because of race, and definitely can't call it systemic because of personal decision to be discriminatory.
Should it be taught to our children?
Right.
And should it be, and should we be telling black kids that you're going to get discriminated against?
Okay, 1 second. Okay, hit me with that one more time.
The white person who would be considered white trash, you would get
from society.
No, I want to add, though, what you're describing, though, is discrimination. But
yes, it's systemic discrimination. Yes.
Call it privilege when the reality is, let's say you take the white person.
It's white privilege again is just identifying the group that has the preferential bias in their favor.
Person who would be considered white trash, you would get
like this is just fucking complaining about the terminology.
Same result from them. So I don't think you can necessarily assume that that's because of race, and definitely can't call it systemic because of personal decision to be discriminatory.
Should it be taught to our children? Right.
So again, if you can track millions of personal decisions, then like based on the system of hiring, then that is a systemic problem. It's not about the one guy who like hires for fucking Safeway who doesn't like Jamal's and like, I don't know, Jose's and fucking all the other, and you know, and fucking, I don't know, I'm awful with names, and like at the end of the day, it's not about the like one guy at like any store that just doesn't like the darkies working for him. It's about if you can find that trend across our economy, which you can through the study that this person mentioned, that these biases lie in a lot of different places that are disconnected. Some fuck-ass racist in like Alabama who just doesn't hire the blacks because he doesn't like the blacks somehow comes to the same conclusion because of his biases that somebody in like New York who just, you know, they see like a black name and they think, oh, that troublemaker kid down the street. Like these are still, they're disconnected. They didn't talk to each other, but somehow they came to the same bias and the same and came to the same conclusion, which ends up meaning that like black people might have lower employment, which guess what means higher crime rates because they have to find other ways to make income. Like people still got to eat, pay the rent, pay the bills, got to do something. If no one wants to hire you, then what do? You do illegal work.
Right. And should it be, and should we be telling black kids that you're going to get discriminated against because of the color of your skin, with loans, with redlining, blah, blah, blah?
There is a way to teach cultural responsive teaching.
They should probably be aware of that.
Narrow-minded, but it's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Even if you talk about the systems in place that privilege different groups at different times in different spaces, I'm not saying that when you teach CRT, when you teach about the history of this country that has privileged certain groups and not privileged black people, I think it's important to acknowledge that black people have persevered throughout that. There's so much excellence. And I think that you do all kids a disservice when you say, okay, the history of black people in this country or the history of women in this country is that they were oppressed the whole time and they weren't resisting. And then the Civil War happens and, the slaves are freed and the black people just stopped resisting, economic injustice until the Civil Rights Movement. That is not the case of history in this country. And so I feel like it's very important.
We also didn't do enough during Reconstruction.
It's about resistance. It's about resistance to the power structure that suggests that some people deserve to get more if they work hard than another group of people if they work the same level.
And not just resistance, but resilience.
You mentioned history, and a lot of you are educators. I'm just curious, What do you think should or shouldn't be taught, when it comes to U.S. history in the K through 12 environment?
So I think it's just this really unbalanced way that they're teaching it right now, especially the ones that are.
Oh my God, this person doesn't have opinions. All they do is fucking complain that they're like, I don't like how this was taught. Somebody said something I didn't like. They're asked like, how would you do this? And they open every time with, somebody else did it differently and I didn't like it. Like, holy shit, can you please come to this conversation with an actual fucking opinion and a vision? Because this is the problem I have, is people like this have no fucking vision for the future, have no fucking vision for education, have no fucking vision of what they want. They only know what they don't want. And we cannot build a society on what the things that we don't want. We will always find things that we don't want, but we need to find the things that we do and that offer us benefits. God damn it.
CRT that's creating this narrative that it's all white people to blame when there was so many people involved in the transatlantic slave trade. The British were actually the ones that stopped it and used their own resources to stop the slave trading ships from continuing. They went to Africa to stop them, stop bringing them to the coast because we're not buying them anymore. And so this idea that I just feel bad for our children because they're not being taught it in a perspective that is holistic, basically.
And even to this day, there are slaves in Libya held captive by black people. So this is not a white and black issue. But even with that said, I think leaving the public school system, we're teaching American,
holy shit, we're teaching American history. It is a white and black problem if it's localized to the United States. The concept of slavery is universal, but in the United States, it's localized to white people owning black people because that's how it took place here. Those were the two groups, white Europeans buying black Africans. That's how it worked. You can argue that there are black people who own slaves and are in Africa. There are black people who own black slaves. No shit, because it's Africa. It's not the fucking US. It's not the thing that we're teaching right now. Like, what the fuck?
I mean, when we talk about this, we left with the idea that black history is slavery and Jim Crow. And we're rarely talking about the Reconstruction era, the amount of senators and politicians.
We are not talking about Reconstruction.
Slavery.
That is
true. It was just so many things that we did after slavery
you
that
mean
we're
the
being told we can't do
systems
today somehow. That is just asinine.
There's no conservative in America who's saying don't teach slavery in the classrooms. But if you're going to talk about slavery, to his point, let's talk about Madam C.J. Walker. Let's talk about George Washington.
You're so
Carver.
stupid.
Let's talk about all these black people who have done some really incredible things that, in spite of quote-unquote systemic racism and all of these things, have achieved. Let's talk about Barack Obama. Let's talk about Kamala Harris.
You're right. We don't talk about any of those people, including Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. You're totally right. We never talk about Barack. Fucking Jesus, kill me now. Smite me now, Lord.
Why is every conversation we have to have about black people in the classroom about us being in chains, downtrodden, and having no hope? That's a problem. And Black History Month, it's American history. Let's talk about that too. Those are important inspirational stories.
Cool. Can we talk about slavery? If we can talk about black history, can we please talk about how black people got here and the systems that bear down on them since their arrival in this country? No, because then conservatives bitch and moan that it's anti-white. If you want to teach black history, I'm totally fine with that. But you need to teach the actual history, and you need to teach how the slave trade and the prominence of slavery in the South, along with the Jim Crow era laws until the Civil Rights Movement, and after also what's all happened after Jim Crow. You have to fucking teach where all of this stuff comes from. So much American culture comes from the influence of African Americans, but so much of it has been obscured or actively obfuscated for the influence of white musicians, white influence, any of all this stuff. You can't talk about black history in America without talking about systemic racism. They're right there. Everything black people have done in this country has been a reaction to their arrival, their lack of freedom, their gaining of freedom, their perseverance through Jim Crow, their fighting during the Civil Rights Movement, and their proliferation as entertainment, as entertainers, as creators, as artists, as everything else right fucking now. But you cannot have this conversation without with just being oh, but if you talk about any of the systemic racism, then it's mean to white people. Okay, cool. Then we can't talk about anything then. Cool. Then we don't talk about any of the perseverance. It's not you need to teach all of this.
That are not taught in the classroom.
Do you think that the fight against CRT is hurting the like efforts for more like diversity and inclusion.
I don't want diversity and inclusion. I mean, we
want
already
more,
have that.
What I mean by that
Do
is
we?
like you said you want more like black
Is that
stories of hope
so?
and success and like.
Can you
all
give
of
me
that.
some
That's what I mean.
statistics
But
for
that's
that?
unfortunately not what CRT is. Yeah.
I know.
That's actually
This person would have their fucking shirt tucked in.
I think what's really clear is there's a lot of big opinions on education, you know, across the spectrum, and really thankful to all of you for sharing, you know, your perspectives, where you're coming from.
Oh my God.
Some of you said it wasn't like this when you were kids. 20 years ago, school was really different. Maybe you couldn't even imagine having some of these conversations. So just want to pose the question to you, and where do we go from here?
I believe that we have to recontextualize the way that we approach education as a society, and specifically how we've kind of started to use education as a political tool. At its core, education serves society. It needs to be a collaborative effort, because if education serves society, society should be investing in education.
We as adults have a lot of work to do, and it's both at kitchen tables and school boards and forums like this. Obviously, literacy is a part of that, and I think there are other parts of that too. But the only way that we can move forward is if, instead of just talking about what do we talk to kids about, I think we have to first get better about how do we talk to each other about this.
I think we have to recenter education about actually preparing young people for the real world and acknowledging the fact that we're not going to have a one.
Let's prepare them with the real world by not teaching them at all about Black history, by allowing them to not be given a Black history training. Oh my God. Fucking let's teach them about the real world and about the Bible. Oh my God. I know I interrupt this person all the time because they're so fucking stupid.
Fits all approach that works for every student across America. We
God.
have no room and no time, frankly, to teach all these divisive things because we have urban literacy rates that are down in the dumps. When those kids learn how to read, then we can talk about gender theory, CRT. But until we have children who are proficient and above a third grade reading level, and a majority of those kids in cities like Chicago and Detroit, we don't need to be.
Oh my God! Stop talking about Chicago and Detroit. It's so boring. So fucking boring. Wow, poor city, like cities made up of like of poor people who get poor educations because their poor school is funded by their poor taxes. Don't do well because they live in a poor neighborhood and go to poor and drive poor cars, are coming out with bad outcomes. Whoa, you fucking got me there.
Having a conversation about whether or not students should be learning about privilege in schools.
The number one policy thing that I come back to that we must do to improve
What's the harm of them learning
is to
about
put in
it?
school choice at a universal level. It's far too overdue. It will incentivize the public schools to fix a lot of the problems that they have.
How would it incentivize? How would it incentivize? If they don't have money, they can't do anything. It would literally be how would school choice help public schools? They wouldn't get any funding. They would be stuck with like $5 fucking for the entire year's budget. There'd be one teacher for an entire fucking neighborhood. Like, the only thing this would do good is private institutions and private education corporations would then get access to primary education. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word.
Back into the parent to get their child an education that best meets their needs. And I do think that if we're going to build the best generation of young people,
why don't we just fund the schools we have now,
kindness and active listening before we get into racial privilege theory, gender privilege theory,
educating our kids.
I think that it's so important to get back to critical thinking and understanding that
critical
the way
race
that we raise
thinking.
the next generation is also, not necessarily staying fixed ourselves. I think you were saying that, your wife is learning with the kids.
Is pain.
And if we continue to learn about, hey, how do we do this better for ourselves? How do we treat each other better? The more that we do that, the better that we will be able to collaborate with people we disagree with. The better that we'll be able to make a curriculum that actually does, speak about the excellence that you're able to do if you, continue to challenge yourself and strive and push forward.
On this panel, a really huge set of diverse opinions. There wasn't really a bad guy. It was, we all wanted the same thing at the end. We just had different ways to get there. So I just think the collaboration.
There was. We all know who it is.
With anyone.
I think we need to make sacrifices for our children's future and
I
prioritize
like this dude
them a bit
until
more
I
today.
learned he's
Aside from that, if you
homophobic.
choose the public school route, I'm all for the collaborative effort, but what that needs to look like is parents showing up to the PTA meetings, showing up to the school board meetings, knowing and being inside the classroom and being actively involved, regardless of which route you take.
I think we put too much faith into the education of our children in public education when we should be doing more of that ourselves. And we need to make sure that we put more power into the parents and empower them to take control of their child's education.
We just need to stop burning down the house. I truly believe that we can save public ed. If we stop arguing with each other and start pouring more resources and really buckling down to save this thing that really in turn saves us as a society, we can do it. We just need to stop chasing all of these boogeyman's that we are just kind of seeing in the media.
You know, let her finish.
Polarize everybody and make everybody so angry. Like, we need to stop that and like save what we have, because what we have can be great and we need it.
Okay, I think that will do it for us. Thank you all so much for taking your time and for sharing your opinions and being so respectful of each other. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
You did it. You did it. You passed.
Let's go.
All right.
No,
All right. Get me out of here. Jesus Christ. Wow, that made me angrier than I thought. Sometimes, you know, sometimes I wonder if I just like being angry and yelling at stuff, which might be the case, but you know what? Makes me vaguely happy in a weird way. Okay, so the only actual thing I want to also say that I didn't say earlier, but have colleges gotten cheaper over the years? They haven't, right? So what makes any of these people think, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing, Matt? What are you doing? Okay, I don't know why that played. Oh, okay. But anyway, yeah, are colleges cheaper? Have they gone down in price over the last 20 years? They haven't, right? So, like, I don't understand when people say, like, oh, you know, you move it into private education or the private sector, and then, like, you know, they'll compete for students. No, they won't. They're not going to compete for students in terms of, like, price. They're going to compete for students in terms of, like, quality. Meaning if you come from a bad neighborhood, they're just not going to accept you after a point. And even if you do come in from a bad neighborhood, you know, they don't really have a vested interest in educating that kid specifically. They're just going to kind of, you know, give them as many resources as they need to just slide by. And if those kids eventually move schools, then they're the better for it. But in no way would like a private only educational system result in education being cheaper. We would probably end up the same way we pay extra for healthcare, the same way we pay extra for college education, the same way in the US we pay extra for fucking everything that should be a fucking societal, like, bought in through your taxes process. Everything gets more expensive, yet we don't see any of this in terms of kickback of like the kids who go to private schools don't perform that much better, if better at all, than kids who go to public schools. So they're not performing better, they're not cheaper, so what's the benefit we're getting? Answer, nothing. There is no benefit. We're just kind of like, you know, you're just sending money to private institutions who aren't accountable to you because they're accountable to the shareholders. And if you want shareholders, you know, if you want your school to be run like a business, if you want the guy who owns stock in your school to be the person that your school is concerned about, not about your kid's education, then, you know, that's all you. But, like, I certainly don't trust it at all. But anyway, that's going to be it for me tonight. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, same time, you should hit the follow button if you're on Twitch. And if you're on YouTube, there's like a subscribe button. Way longer word, a little bit cooler, but you should also subscribe to that. Yeah, it'd just be like really cool. You would be a really cool person, you know, just improve your standing. You would get like some karma points. You know, you might go to the good place afterwards. But either way, yeah, that's it. Tomorrow we're gonna go over the two things that I kicked back. So we're still gonna go over that Charlie Chun video, and then the male crisis thing that Sagar brought up on Breaking Points the other day. So I kind of want to look at those two. Other than that, I'm sure there'll be other things. But yeah, you all have a lovely night, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye bye.